So you'll just have to do adjourn. And there's none. And I say. As if you
today, and so the topics we want to cover today include discussion about the county vehicle fleet, Asheville Buncombe Technical Community College's capital budget, discussion on affordable housing, and those are the topics we want to cover today. I do have one announcement I need to make. I've got a family appointment at 2:30, which is just very close to here, but I'll need to walk out of the building just a few minutes ahead of that. So if the work session goes longer than that, totally okay, but I just want to let everyone know I personally have a hard stop at that time. All right, any questions about the agenda? All right, let's launch right in. And Greg, I think you're up first, and you're going to be helping tee off a conversation about the vehicle fleets, as well as then we'll just move into the AV Tech capital items as well.
Situated here. Well, I do want to talk to you today about Buncombe County Fleet. I'm going to give you an overview of the fleet itself. We'll look at the availability of the fleet, the age, classification. That'll lead us into acquisition. What determines when we buy, purchase new vehicles. We'll also look at the budget and electric vehicles. Buncombe County Fleet, at the time of this report, stood at 418 vehicles. The thing you always want to keep in mind about fleet is that's always a plus or minus 10 to 15 vehicles, because as new vehicles come in, before old ones get out, they can be in the system at the same time. All of the comparisons that I gave you today are against Sheriff's Department. They're the largest portion of our fleet. So the Sheriff's Department is 61% of Buncombe County's total fleet. Miles driven in FY17, 4,700,000. 72% of those miles were logged by the Sheriff's Department. And the average miles per gallon overall on the fleet is 13.2. Sheriff's being 14.4. And you would, it's a little surprising when you think about it, but in the overall fleet is where all the heavy trucks are. And all the general service vehicles, things like that. So that's why you'll see a lower mileage when you look at the overall fleet availability. Buncombe County fleet stands at 95%, with Sheriff's at 96%. The factors that affect availability are the garage facility and its staff, driver abuse affects it, and crashes. How long is that vehicle sitting, waiting to be repaired? Or if it's unrepairable, how long is it before we get it sold? All those affect availability. The overall age of our Buncombe County fleet is 76 months. The Sheriff's fleet averaging at 66 months. We have 107 vehicles that are 10 plus years old in our fleet. Some of them, we've got some that are even 40 years old that Jerry's got. It's probably no surprise that he hangs on to stuff. But, that affects your overall age. Classification is vehicle type. And I will tell you that as a county-wide, we're trending towards SUVs and all-wheel drive vehicles. The factors that influence that are recent weather patterns. You know, we seem to be getting a lot more snow and ice days than we have in the past. There's a same-day service philosophy in Buncombe County departments, whether it's permits or who it is. You know, you come in for service, we're going to try our best to meet that need as quickly as possible. That means no matter what the weather is, no matter what the terrain is, you know, we'll make it to wherever you're at for providing your service. So that philosophy has a whole lot to do with it. Law enforcement response time, middle of the night, bad weather, remote conditions. That all goes back to trending SUV, all-wheel drive. DSS has a part in that. When they have to go out and transport a mother, child, and their belongings, they need a decent-sized vehicle that'll haul 3 or 4 people and belongings to get them back out of where they're at. And just the remoteness of our population, as the population grows, as everybody knows, they're spreading out and hitting these mountaintops with developments and things like that. So it's not easy terrain, it's not city terrain. So that's why you see them trending SUV, all-wheel drive. That brings us to acquisition. And basically what that means is, you know, what are the determining factors for me to decide to replace a vehicle? That is a comparison that you see there. That is, those 2 vehicles are in the same department, they're in the same division of that department, they perform the same duty, and they're the same age. We bought them at the same time. So the center point of that, the linchpin of that, is the cost per mile. The one with the higher mileage is operating at 20 cents per mile. So the lower mileage vehicle is operating at 34 cents a mile. And that's a trigger point for us in our software system. When we have vehicles that reach in the mid-30s, it flags us and we start looking at them. The things we look at there are mechanical problems. You know, do we have a negligent operator? Or is it just the end of useful life of the vehicle? Our goal is 200,000 miles. And that's kind of a new goal with us. We're trying to do better with what we got. Our goal is 200,000 miles of a vehicle if the cost per mile stays within that range, a reasonable range.
Does that include fuel, Greg?
It does. Fleet budget. This is the budget for the next fiscal year. In ambulance replacement, we have $400,000. And what we do is we build that money the way we used to do it years ago. Every year we put in so much, and at the end of 5 years, when it's time to start purchasing new vehicles, we've got the money made there. So, in theory here, $400,000. We're missing a 0 up there, I see. Times 5 years, give me $2 million to replace ambulances. General government is $200,000 a year, and that's just basically everybody but sheriff and ambulance. As the vehicle ages out, the cost per mile gets out of range, that's the money I use to buy a new permits truck or a new general services truck. Sheriff's Department is funded at $475,000. All of these numbers are lower than they were 4 to 5 years ago. And what that does, by a reduced budget, we're aging the fleet. We're not able to replace as many vehicles as fast. Now, that's not a bad thing necessarily. You remember we said we were at 76 months on fleet age. I'd really like to see that overall fleet age get closer to between 90 and 96 months. But the point is, when we reach that age, we need to stop the aging process of the fleets. And that means we have to fund more aggressively at that time. Performance management is working on the budget forecasting team. It's going to be able to, give us those numbers well ahead of time. It can project when our fleet is going to reach roughly an average age of 96 months, tell you what the budget needs will be at that time. We were asked to look at electric vehicles for the county fleet. And electric vehicles have come down in price. And I hesitate to say this now because I should say it at the end, but they've not gone up in size in ground clearances. So we were given the task to look at electric vehicles. So pulled together 5 stakeholders. We got fleet manager, garage manager, general services director, sustainability officer, assistant county manager. We all got together and we said, how can we use electric vehicles, totally electric vehicles in our fleet? And so really we're back to the classification study. Where will this vehicle fit in our fleet? And, what we come to find out is the county tends to work in wedges instead of concentrically. So that permitting person will work from, once it gets outside the city limits, of course, from the center of town in a wedge shape towards the edge of the county. We have defined paths, same way with law enforcement. So you not only need to be able to drive on a flat city street, you need to be able to get to the furthest housing development up the steepest road, in a slick condition to provide this service. So we looked at classification. It went right back to the same analysis, talking about weather patterns, same-day service, law enforcement, social services having to move people, the size of the vehicle, and the remoteness of the population. We also looked at the charging infrastructure. Most of these newer electric vehicles in prime conditions will average about 100 miles. It doesn't take into effect our mountains here. So we've got to have a somewhat controlled charging infrastructure. Right now, the chargers we have in place are pretty much monopolized. One person pulls in a morning electric vehicle, they plug it in, whether it's charged in an hour or 3 hours, they use that as a parking space all day long for their job. So we would have to come up with a private infrastructure for charging, is what we've determined. Another problem we have with our battery vehicles that we have now is the battery life. Due to these limiting factors, the weather, the remoteness, and those things, they just don't get used enough. And what we're finding is the batteries fail prematurely on these vehicles because they'll sit there and, they kind of imprint and they just get weaker and weaker over time. So we took all that information and I kind of polled some department directors, department fleet managers, and said, where can I fit this vehicle in your fleet? And they were all willing to take the vehicle. But they all to a T said, I can't use this as a primary because I have these limitations. I have to get from A to B. Let's just use permits for an example. It doesn't matter if it's wet, dry, whatever it is. I've got to be able to get into that job site. And I can't perform that every day with an electric vehicle, with a Chevy Bolt or a Nissan Leaf or a Ford Focus. It limits compartments. So that being said, we can always find a spot to put them. I don't see them as a viable replacement. Like we could take all of tax and say, okay, we're changing your fleet to electric. It just wouldn't allow them to get to the places they needed to go. All right, questions on fleet?
Are there hybrid vehicles used?
We have hybrids now, and we have hybrids in the sheriff's fleet that we use that are dependable vehicles. The problem that you have is the only one that meets the need there again is like a hybrid SUV because of the amount of material that people have to carry with them or the people that they have to carry with them. When you go back, we have a Leaf in the fleet that IT uses. And it's pretty much, it suits them for around town, one man carrying a laptop. It's not a service vehicle, it's not a law enforcement vehicle. The biggest problem we have trouble with, I guess, in any of them, are the Priuses. A lot of those have landed as social services, but you can't go get a mother, a child, car seat, diaper bag, clothing in that vehicle and transport it back to town.
I've seen one on sale, Honda. The mileage was good on it. The battery should have been good, but the battery was bad. And if they had utilized it like they should, Honda would replace the battery, but it didn't have the miles on it.
It came back from the factory from us that it was warranty voided because it hadn't been allowed to just make it sit there and die and charge up and sit there and die and charge up.
So the whole electric vehicle arena is going to be one of these really, the options we have today, it's going to look really different, 5 years from now, right? I mean, this is like the Manning's article I saw a couple of months ago about the projected uptake in the market around electric vehicles, and it's really just, just by, people who do this professionally, not just the components of it, but it's going to be a big percentage of the vehicle fleets out there, in the years to come. So hopefully there'll be a lot more different kind of options than we have right now. Maybe some of these other bigger vehicles that we need, things like that, there'll be electric versions of those. Like Volkswagen announced earlier this week, they've got 30 different models
They did.
coming out over the next couple of years. So, I certainly appreciate the fact that we need to, have the appropriate vehicles for the different functions, but I definitely, there's a lot of advantages to the technology, so I appreciate us looking at it and continuing to do so as we.
I agree with you.
The technologies,
I think we look to the future on it. I think if we look at anything, I think we look at our charging, our infrastructure. We need to be, if we want to go that route, which I think is completely plausible, I think we need to be looking at today about the infrastructure we're going to need 3 or 4 years from now and start making those plans and get it together. And as those vehicles come down in price and make it more usable to us, and as they come larger in size where they'll meet our needs, we'll have that infrastructure in place to put right into work.
And on the infrastructure, this is kind of such a new thing, electric charging station concepts. But there's so many things to like about it. Environmentally, using the power from power we can make here, not, reliance on oil so much. I'd like for us to think about what do we do to both think about our own fleet in the future as well as sort of, the larger community in terms of how this infrastructure is getting built. And I don't really know what the business models are for how that's going to work. We've got gas stations now for gas, but is it all going to be sort of private sector led, or what role do local governments have in terms of encouraging the build out of electric vehicle infrastructure in the community, both for our own public fleets as well as kind of enabling people who want to purchase those for their private use or business use to kind of make it more more realistic and convenient.
I think that the charging devices themselves have finally the water's kind of calmed on that, and they've come to a point where I think they'll stay for a while. So it all goes back to controlling that charger. How do we get that person to go in there, charge, and then leave?
And then get off it,
and
right?
then have it for somebody else.
Right. Right, put a parking meter on it.
Yeah, what you do is you just treat it like a market meter. They gotta go in there and
The charges that we have in
swipe,
place,
and they get 2 hours, and that's all they give, or
the
whatever.
charges that we have in place now, we looked at that when we first put them in, because everybody wanted to, they want people to charge, but we didn't want to lose money on it.
Yeah.
And so, everything to make that, where you could swipe a card and charge that bill, for the few that we have, we were losing money putting all that together, versus just say, here, go in there and charge.
Right. Other questions about the vehicle fleet, chief? All right, let's move on to AV Tech.
And you've got a book in front of you. And some of you got a packet.
To do.
I'll talk for a minute, and I'll let you know when we get to the book. A year and a half ago, whenever this came up, y'all asked me with 3 things: to do a facility assessment, get a handle on the capital process at AB Tech, and look into plant operations and how it was managed and how it related to the funding that Buncombe County provides. And after that fact also came in utilization. Are the facilities being utilized to their fullest potential? Okay, so first slide, just to give you a reference, 24 facilities and 1 parking deck. So I'm going to be looking at 25 facilities at AB Tech during this assessment process. Okay, this should be the first page you have in your book. We have a website that's being developed. They'll have all this assessment information in it. And this is just a page I pulled out of it. So what we see on this page is the facility assessment dashboard. You'll notice the first tab. Hang on, let's see my. First tab is overall condition. That's on the left side, and obviously all red, except for the one yellow down there. And the way that's determined is the capital needs we've determined. What's the dollar amount of the capital needs versus the value of the facility itself? Shows that we're wanting in that respect. Next column is immediate needs. That looks better. It's got 4 green blocks on it. Reason that is, we've already instituted current year 18 capital plan. So when we put that plan in play, all these items that were in this assessment database got pulled out. According to the database, these items are done. So immediate needs on these 6 facilities, they're actually in progress, but the database sees them as complete. Short term is mostly red. Reason being that the capital process has not been doing its job at AV Tech, and everything falls in a short-term need. It's been let go. We got to fix it in a certain amount of time. And for the same explanation, long-term needs, it actually looks pretty good. That's because I've got nothing in those categories. The needs are so critical that they all fall short-term. As we proceed with this process, when you click on this dashboard, and you may have already got your link, or you'll soon get your link, when it's complete, that will be a list of 26 down through there. I'm going to say in about 3 years, by 20, this thing will normalize, and it'll start making more sense. You won't see all red columns or all green columns, but we've got to get in there and do this initial 2 to 3 years of work to get it back to something that looks normal, basically. Next slide is just another snapshot of the website. When you go to this website and you find Simpson, this will be one of 6 pages. So this goes as deep as you want to get into it. You can go all the way down to the bottom, the rabbit hole, if you so desire. But the website itself, Dustin, I'll look at you, is that when we overlay our face on the assessment, is that available now, or is that 90 days, or is that whatever I say?
There's a preliminary link available to you all now.
Okay.
That is just to the advisory committee.
Right. Eventually, this will open up to be a public site so that everybody can see what's going on. So the assessment's ongoing. I think we'll be 75% complete by January of 19. I think we'll be complete by July of 19 with all 25 facilities. All right, so active projects at AV Tech. If you look behind tab 1 in your folders, I'm not going to read you all this information. It's there for you later. You have a sheet you should be looking at that says Ferguson Center, 5th floor, upfit. This is shelled space that we created when we built Allied Health Center. General Services is doing this work. I'm just guessing real conservatively that 70-75% of this work is done in-house by county employees. And we did that. We had a limited budget, and so that was the way we could meet that budget on that project. It's a 3-phase project. Building core, early childhood development, physical therapy assistant wing. Building core is already there with elevators and restrooms. We built 4 flex-use class spaces around that building core. Early childhood development, all this is in progress. Work scheduled to be completed mid-July of this year. Phase 3 is physical therapy assistant. Work is scheduled to begin early April, completed mid-December. All right, if you'll turn over your page, you have 2 sheets there. This is the current year capital project, CY18. There's 11 buildings in current year capital project. And as you read through this, it's roofing, envelope, HVAC, fire alarm, those are the things you're going to notice in your packet. This is those first-year critical items that we had to get done. As you see more capital plans come to you, you should see the number of buildings getting smaller. Dollar amounts will stay the same, but this is that stuff we had to go across the campus and get fixed quick. Next page in your book is the schedule for this current year project. This is just a short-term design schedule. Basically, it tells you that work will begin July 1 on the $3.9 million for the current year project. The link that you've been sent gives you all this in detail. It's just too much information to try to put up on the screen or try to bring to you as paper.
Greg, I don't think we have those pages in the first, this is in the first tab, right? We have all of those pages, just so FYI, we got the detail on each of the buildings, and we got the capital improvement page.
Okay.
I think it was on the link on the website there.
It's on the link on the website. I just reminded the staff, not everybody has the laptop with them. So Lynn's making some hard copies to bring down.
All right, well, let's go to tab 2 and see if it's any better there. Tab 2, we're going to be talking about facility assessment and capital process, the phases in the assessment and the priorities in the capital process. You should have a campus map as your first page. The only reason I've got that in there is to show you that the buildings in bold on the left, those buildings are complete. The assessment's complete, and it's in the database. The 10 buildings that are not bold, those are in progress. Those are the ones that expect to be complete by January. So that data will be in the database. Does everybody have a fold out that says priority 1? Okay, so what we've already done is we've looked at the current year plan. That's the 11 buildings. The priority 1 items that you're looking at on this page become current year when they're placed in the design phase. So this year we're going to have current year 18 operating and current year 19 operating at the same time. Once we get it in the design phase, the database is reprioritized and you have a new list of items, priority 1 items. If you look on the back, lower right, you'll see that the budget is $2.243 million. So my budget that's been set for me at AB Tech is $2 million, so I'm 11% over budget. What I brought to the committee was that I want to bid $300,000 worth of this as alternates. I'd hate to trim this estimated list down to $2 million and then get a 1.6 or 1.7 bid in on bid day. If I bid it all with $300,000 as alternates, I can load this project to the maximum $2 million limit. I've also asked them for a 1.5% window on that $2 million. If I get this whole package out there and it comes back at $2,009,000, I don't want to drop a $100,000 project over $9,000. So I'm asking just for 1.5% to work each way, either up or down on that. This list has been presented to the AB Tech Capital Committee as the next capital plan. And if I'm remembering correctly, it was approved, so it's out there and ready to go. Your next fold out is priority 2 items. The only reason I'm going through this is because this is what you're going to see on the website. If you'll look at the second page, it shows $2.8 million as the estimate for this package. So what that tells me is I've got some work to do here, and I can do it through priorities. I need to reprioritize and get that down in really close to $2 million. The last fold out in this section is priority ABT. When we were building this, we had priorities 1 through 4. And we found the items that really shouldn't have been in the capital process, that should have been handled by AB Tech plant operations. So we've started putting these in this new priority list we've made. And so we'll pass this over to the AB Tech staff and say this needs to be handled within your operating budget. Any questions on priority plans?
Basically, what what you're doing is, he brought it to us, and he's taken some buildings that are, we call them fives, that are bad, and he's not gonna be able to bring them all the way back to ones, but he's gonna try to get them back to twos, make sure that we have something that Lady Tech has for a while. The way it is right now, in 5 more years, half these buildings, if we don't do something, they're gonna be junk, and they'll be wanting more stuff, so. He's looked at it really hard, and I appreciate everything he's done, and Alan, and Mr. Whiteside, and Mr. Presley both have been part of going through this. And what we're seeing is, if we don't do something, maybe that's in real deep trouble. And we're not having enough money to bail them out. We don't get on with it now.
Okay, so the next thing is utilization study. And it is behind tab 3. If you go back to those 3 original tasks I was given, assessment, process, and operations, really if you sum that up, it kind of builds utilization. And we got to talking about it in the capital committee 6 or 8 months ago. We decided we need to do a utilization study to see how these classrooms are being utilized, and that'll help us in the capital process to see where the dollars need to go. First page is the method of the utilization study. Gives a description of how we went about this. What we found is that community colleges and universities tend to compare themselves as a whole towards one another. You know, the average of the entire campus versus the average of another entire campus. What we've done is taken a specific classroom and compared it to the University of North Carolina standard of how many hours of operation it should see per week. So that's kind of the basis of our study here. This is a pilot study. We did 10 classrooms, and the committee has asked that we expand this study. So your first fold out, and this can really, I would encourage you, if this interests you as a board, to choose somebody or 2 somebodies that this stuff interests them, you know, is pretty good at math. And I'd love to take our designer of this, sit down with you and them, and really get you into it where you can say, yeah, I get it, because it can be confusing. So the 2 things that I found here that really stand out is the percent occupancy. And that's what that really is confusing at first. You think about that as the room itself, but that really speaks to the course that's being taught in there in respects to the room it's being taught in. And then we'll look at weekly room hours. You need to keep in mind, University of North Carolina says 35 hours is what they recommend. Somebody should be in this room receiving instruction 35 hours per week. So if we look at the second block, second floor classroom, room 208, I'm only going to go through all of them once, kind of give you an idea of what this means. It's a 710 square foot classroom. The capacity is 14 students. Each student has 51 square feet of workspace. There's 11 people enrolled in the class that happens in the course that happens in this classroom. I'm going to go over 2 columns. So this classroom is utilized 22.5 hours per week. And that's actual time somebody's got sitting in a chair receiving instruction. So this course is working to 79% of its potential.
Could you clarify? Did you say the classroom's working to 79% of potential, or the one course is?
The course is working 79% of its potential.
I'm sorry, I'm not tracking with that. So a course would be like a biology 101.
Whatever's
meets in
taught.
that classroom 3 times a week. That's only operating because it's not enrolled to full capacity.
Exactly.
Okay.
When we look in the first floor, room 121, it becomes a little more evident. There again, you know, big classroom, 1,654 square feet. If you look at weekly room hours, that's key for us in the capital process. That 1,654 square feet they're in there 2 hours a day. Somebody's sitting in that classroom 2 hours per day. Now the course is operating at 38% because you have an enrollment of 20 people. And like I said, it gets confusing. We're talking about course potential versus classroom utilization. It's in there for 2 hours a week. On the right-hand side of your sheet,
That's basically, that classroom, isn't that 2 hours a week
2 hours per week.
that it's used?
Yes.
Is that classroom used for
Not
other
2 hours a day.
courses?
A week, not a day.
I think
And-
that's a relevant point that's come out in the discussion with AD Tech is their belief, and Greg will have to help me with the terminology, that classrooms are built for a specific class or course, and our belief moving forward, we don't want to invest public money in buildings that can't be used flexibly because community college is always changing courses based on workforce. But, so I think it's important both to how the allied health building's being used and then how you all make decisions moving forward. But, I mean, and Greg spent more time on this than I have, but AD Tech would say that classroom is specific. I think that one might be the Farm Tech. They built a new program based on believing there was a need. Their enrollment's not as high as they anticipated, and that's the only way they're using that classroom. Is that correct?
That is correct. And if you'll notice, the classroom was built to hold 52 people. But in the comments section to the right, I'll just read it to you. Limited to 30 spots in program annually due to number of clinicals required by accreditation. So accreditation says, even though you've got a 52-seat classroom, you can only put 30 people in it. Well, the interest that you've got is only 20 people. And that's how that percentage on the end comes to bear. If you took that, let's just say there was no limit on it. If you had 52 people in a 52-seat classroom, you'd have 100% occupancy over at the end. You know, if they could fill it up to accreditation levels and say, we got 30 people in there, it would be a 61% occupancy,
But only for 2 hours a week.
only for 2 hours a week. That's why I say you got two things going on here. How is that room being utilized? It's only being utilized 2 hours out of a potential of 35, so it's being utilized 6% of its potential.
So it's being underutilized across both of those variables.
And that's, that room basically, didn't we pay like 225,000 a square foot for?
That, we were around $225 a square foot on that. That's basically 1,700 square feet, so you're $370,000.
So, you know, in terms of this whole question about can classrooms be used for just, you know, particular classes being taught there or multiple classes, I mean, it seems like there's some things like, you know, science labs or things like that that are just, you know, really unique and designed for a real particular purpose, and doing other things there might be kind of awkward. But I mean, a lot of, I mean, certainly the academics and stuff like that, I mean, that's a lot more, the classroom's kind of a classroom, right? So,
Yeah, I would think, and this is what I told Andy, if we'd had this information when we were building this building and realized that, you know, we would only get 2 hours a week utilization out of it, we probably would have found a different way to accommodate this course.
Right. Yeah.
well, but I guess I just, you know, I mean, the buildings we have are the buildings we have, but to what extent, I mean, is this kind of still up for discussion, right? I mean, because it's, I mean, like, what would be different about the classroom? Or I guess, you know, again, like science labs, things like that are so unique, I kind of get it, but like, I guess I need some more convincing that these classrooms can't be used for other
Right.
purposes
I think
now.
that's where the AD Tech Capital Committee landed, which is why they also said, and I do want to say, this is apples to apples. This is a patented utilization tool that these architects developed for colleges and community colleges.
Yes.
And that's why we're saying we want to see it. The things, and the commissioners who are part of that should weigh in, we asked them for is we want to see this campus-wide before we look at any additional investment. Second thing is, when you tell us it's an accreditation standard, does the standard absolutely say nothing can be taught in there but Farm Tech, or does it say when Farm Tech's in there, they need this much space, which would be what we would think. So we are at, I mean, the committee and Commissioners Whiteside and Presley and the Vice Chair should weigh in, have said that AD Tech, you know, to their trustees in our regular meeting. We can't move forward without a better understanding of this and build additional space, is what's the capacity in the current campus.
And I think this is really good work, and not only for us to utilize further investment, but A/B test to see what's working and what isn't working.
Right.
And, you know, consolidate things, that's just better for everybody.
And I think A.B. Tech, the trustees that were there saw it that way.
I agree, I agree.
Because what was surprising to me being on this is from being on the university board, you know, you might have a chemistry building, but in those classrooms, you could have a history course, English course or whatever, you know, as long as you didn't go in the labs.
That's right.
But what they tell us though at Buncombe Tech is that because of certification, some rooms, if you have, say if it's designated for barber course, I'm just using that, that's all you can use it for.
Right.
And that's what's confusing, what's different, something, you know, I hadn't heard before. I mean, that's what's unique, I guess, to the community college system. But I refuse to believe that we can't come up looking ahead on the way we design our buildings and all, and do a better job, because if you look at what we've got now, we're not utilizing the rooms. Plus, when you look at with heating them, with the utilities and all, we're losing money.
If you look on the bottom of your page, you'll see that the average is 11.9 hours of instruction per week that happen in these 10 classrooms.
Wow. Say that again?
On the bottom of your page, in your averages,
Yeah.
make sure I'm on the right column, yeah, weekly room hours, average, that's the number of hours somebody's sitting in those seats. And for those 10 classrooms, that average is 11 hours for a week that those classrooms are being utilized.
So, Greg, is there any idea if you were to compare this to Blue Ridge or whoever else, you know, are they gonna be sitting at, 15 hours? Or are they gonna be sitting at 30 hours? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
In fairness to A.B. Tech.
Well, all I can say that, all I know at this point, now I need to go back and ask that question. All I can say at this point is, most of the comparisons you see take an entire college and compare it to an entire college. And they don't really look at it in the depth that we do. They don't look at it as how many hours are these seats actually in use. They just look at it as, what I've seen pretty much, the amount of enrollment in that course. It doesn't speak to the actual usage.
They mentioned, somebody else tried to chime in, they mentioned in our meeting, Joe, that when you look at overall the community college system, that they only use, what is it, 55%?
That was the number I remember.
Oh, yeah, that's what I would put, that's the average for the whole.
55%.
55% of what?
State numbers, if they, when I say numbers.
I think they're talking course potential, like we're the percent occupancy.
Yeah.
And if you look on your average line, all the way at the end, see, they're reaching 47% of the course's potential. That goes back to how many students could be there, how many are there. It has nothing to do with how many hours they're sitting in a seat.
47.
Yes. And so that's why I say you got two things. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
That's okay. And on this issue of not being able to use a classroom except for a single class, is their position that like all of these classes would be that way, or some of them flexible and some of them are not flexible?
I don't think in Allied Health I heard of any flexibility.
I did not hear that. It was one of the things we asked to follow up on. This was really the first conversation with the first piece of this utilization assessment back. And those were the questions we asked for clarification.
Yeah, even with the way they did this, we wanted to look at more of the classrooms, and we actually buy some, step up, because that came out very reasonable, and step a little bit more money into just check some of the other buildings and see how the classrooms compare.
And it kind of goes back to what I first said, is I'd love to get some input from non-residents. And this may not be the best way to present this.
This is great. I mean, it's certainly raising really good questions, which we need to figure out. Like, is there a good reason to not be able? Is there really is there a law that says you can't do it?
We've asked
And
to
then
see
second,
that.
is there a good reason that's not intuitive? You know, I mean, this is the first time we talked about it, so maybe some great idea.
The word the dentist told us was, well, we built that for mission. Mission, that will come up with any money, so we need to, supposedly a help, but do that other stuff. So
I think the driver of the conversation was the community colleges are changing courses all the time to meet workforce needs. So we have to build space that can adapt to changing workforce. And we want to understand what, when we build a classroom around one course, then like this is an example where only about 50% of people that anticipated have enrolled in the course. We want to know we can build out to be nimble as workforce needs change. That was the focus of the conversation.
I think too, historically, just, in working with them to expand programs that, instead of a 2-year testing program, consolidating things so that people can have work, they were very difficult, about changing mindset. And finally, after about a year, it went through, but, how do you justify the taxpayers more buildings?
Exactly, kind of goes back to had we known this before we built
Right.
the classroom.
This is great, though. This is really good.
But it sounds like there's also, even if you design some of these spaces to be really flexible, that their position is that at any given time, you can only do one thing for it. So if that class only meets in mornings, it means there'll never be anything done in the afternoon or evening in that classroom space. That just seems kind of hard to accept. Again, except in sort of specialized
Yes, it's a lab,
facilities.
It's been a long time since I've been to college, but, I remember the numbers of rooms. You may or may not, be in accounting, those, next year, those changed, other than a lab. The lab was
Based,
like,
based on class size, a lot of times, how many people we put it in where it fit the best. Okay, the next fold out, and I'm not even gonna fold mine out. It just gives you this same information in graph form. It also gives you the formulas, how these numbers were determined. Weekly student contact hours equals enrollment times weekly enrollment. If you got time to sit down and push everything else out of your way, it makes good sense. We'll move on. Your last tab in your book is plan operations and budget. So this is where we were given the task of look at the plan operations, find a way to measure it and see how it's performing. And what we do at the county is use a cost per square foot analysis to find out how things are going. This was the most grueling thing I've done, and I don't know when, and I'm glad it's behind me. But we were able to determine, the take home on this is, we were able to determine that they are properly funded to take care of those facilities. They got the money there. That was one of the things I was told up front. We're underfunded and understaffed. We determined that they're properly staffed. They've got enough positions to take care of these facilities. So we found out that they're applying $3.99 a square foot to these facilities to take care of them. County, we run somewhere anywhere, depending on which side, we're in the 320 to 345 range. So there's plenty of money there. There's 50 to 70 cents a square foot over what we spend on our buildings, even spend on those buildings. They've got more staff per 100,000 square foot than we do. So I'm just bringing to you, they got the money and they got the staff.
So Greg's answering the question you all raised about how do we get in a situation where there's so many major maintenance issues that have been deferred to the point they have? And is there are we adequately funding them to maintain the buildings they have?
So, my take on this, having been so closely connected to it, identifies to me that one, something we already knew there's a problem with the capital improvement process. We're getting a handle on that. I don't think you can attribute all this to that. I think you got to go back and say, there's some sort of problem in the plant operations department. That kind of stings right off the bat, but that doesn't necessarily to me say that you just need to go jerk the director out of the seat and swap somebody else down. I think think there's more of a structure problem, just sitting back and looking at it, than I do think it's a personnel problem right off the bat. There were several items that I saw that just didn't make good sense to me. You know, the department director can't even see his own budget. You know, as a former director, you've got to be able to see your budget to know where your money goes. But he's held one step back from that. You know, I see a lot of compartmentalization within that department. I don't think that, you know, from me on the outside looking in, you'd ask me who's in charge, I'd say, you know, pick any one of these four. You know, that's kind of the way I see it. And so I think it's more of a structure problem than a personnel problem. I think if you fix the structure, you'll identify a personnel problem, if there is one. So, as to answer the condition of the buildings, that's what I find.
So, Greg, that 4.3 million number, that just reflects, I mean, that's not dollars to actually, well, let me ask, is that dollars to fix things, or is that the staffing to carry out maintenance and, you know?
That is this right here.
Okay.
And it's the plant operations, that's their salaries, wages, and everything. It's custodial, maintenance and grounds. And we'd have to have AB Tech here to really fully, because the grand total of 3.6 doesn't match the previous grand total of 4.1, but they have, in your book, you've got the full budget.
But that doesn't include any capital projects,
No,
that's just the
I'm sorry.
operations, right?
That's just operations. I thought you were asking, did it include maintenance? No
It
capital.
includes maintenance staff, but not like maintenance and like replacing a roof.
No. I do think, though, that as we bring this capital process up, if they stay at being funded at $4 a square foot, there should be, you know, there should be $300,000, $400,000 in there a year that they can pick and choose their own little capital projects and take them on themselves. Because they ought to be operating somewhere around in the 340, 350 range. If they've got 1 million square foot, and they're 50 cents a square foot over, there's 500,000 they could be doing capital work with.
Is that compared to what we operate at?
That's comparing solely to what we operate at.
Does a scale, the size of the organization have anything to do with that percentage?
I don't think so. We're roughly double their size,
Yeah.
but when you break it down to a square foot cost, you know, and they say, well, we run classes 12 hours a day. I said, yeah, I get that, but we run jails 24/7 a day. I think it pretty much averages out. I mean, I don't think you could say penny for penny, but I think when you're talking in the 10 to 20 cent a square foot range, I think it's a pretty good even match.
So there is a repair and maintenance
Yeah, this is-
line in there, so it was answering the question, and the trustees have asked for this information too, is once we've done these major capital repairs, these major projects, is there adequate money to support the ongoing maintenance?
There is adequate money to support it, and actually, I would expect that, you just see that $3.99 a square foot come down. Because as the buildings become repaired, it costs less to take care of them. That's why I'm saying there should be a surplus there in the future for capital work. And these were actuals. This was not budgeted money, this was actuals that we got.
Now, if the grand total is 3.6 million, that means it would be below that 399, it would be some little bit lower number, right? If that's
Yeah,
everything.
And really, this is as close as we could get it before this meeting. I think it's going to have to just really kind of go through and hit it one more time. The number that I know, that I found was $3.99, $3.99. 3.6, I'm not necessarily buying, but that's what they sent me.
But they've got 1 million square feet property there, and you've got 2 million square feet property in the county. They got 20-some employees, and we've got 18 employees.
Something like that. Yeah, we turned out at 1.9, we turned out at 1.8, 1.9 per 100,000 square feet. They were 2.36 per 100,000.
Do you have it, sir?
Seems like there's a lot of room for improvement and streamlining, and does it feel like there's a path forward in terms of the campus being responsive to kind of seeing this data? And
Do y'all feel like the campus is responsive to this? Is that what you asked?
yeah, are you seeing a path forward towards kind of steering into more efficient?
This is, like I said, this part of it has been tough. I think, to say, is everybody on board and happy? No, I don't say that. I think that this was a slap in the face to several of them who just didn't realize this had never been done before. And like I said, I think that the structure needs more work than anything. And pulling that structure out, who's got it in their hands now, and empowering that department director to take responsibility for his department and for his budget, I think that's, in my opinion, that's a key place to start.
I would say AV Tech trustees agreed and supported Greg's role.
Yeah, I agree.
And they're asking for this, I want to be clear. They're saying, help us understand, one, how do we address the major maintenance issues? And then how do we realign our structure and the resources we have to take care of it moving forward? Do you think that's fair? You're on that board.
When I say it was.
Once it's in the room, definitely there, and it's.
When I say it was a slap in the face, it was to those who were seated around the table when we were doing this. Because everybody said, we're underfunded and understaffed. Well, no, you're not, so it doesn't have to be.
So who did this budget? I don't need to know the name, but I mean,
It's AV Tech's budget.
This is AB, there was 5 of us sat down and took AB Tech's budget from FY17 and picked it apart and came up with this. You had a finance officer, a facilities director, and a facilities manager. And at the end of it, our vice president came into it.
so I'm seeing like $150,000
Yeah.
in maintenance. And 2.2 million in pay. I'm just not seeing a very, I would think the budget would be a little different. It's kind of, got some holes in it, is all I'm saying.
So, back to the underutilization of the classroom, I really would like to know how that compares, and I think the basic question is maybe tech gearing itself to the current training that people need to get jobs, and our other community colleges more in depth at that, because as Nancy said, it's very evolving. Are they evolving with?
Right, I see what you're saying, yeah. I don't know how we tie that into the utilization study, but we can see what we can do.
I mean, to me, if it's underutilized, clearly there's a gap in what people need for training and,
Focus is off.
I mean, that was what was great about going to the high schools, all the training that they were doing so that when people got out of school and could have a real job, and maybe tech, or the high schools are better at that than maybe tech.
I think the thing that the Board of Trustees and Commissioners have done is one, form that committee where you each have 3 representatives. Greg is staffing that, you have your CEOs, your CFOs. So they're regularly meeting to talk about, I think everybody wants to say, how do we move forward in a way where we know we're 1, meeting workforce needs, and 2, we're making the most effective, efficient use of public funds we can in the buildings we build and how we maintain the buildings that already exist. So I find that committee structure and Greg's role very helpful, and think AV Tech would say that too.
I think so, and I got to go back and say, we asked how it was being received. I think I'm not meaning to say that we're getting no cooperation. I just think that it was a shock when we got this, and we're not to the cooperating stage yet to go forward. We just now hit this and need to overcome it.
Well, I can tell you one thing. The absolute first meeting we had with the 2 trustees in the room, they were not doing it because they just, what he was telling them, Joe Brummett, which owns Arby's and stuff, that's the first understanding he's ever had about this stuff. And that was his words. This has brought me, it's brought a light to, and Greg's doing a great job for us, truthfully, to try to help make sure that the school stays there. And it's brought back up to something that's usable. It's never going to be a stage 5, the buildings that we got, but he feels like if we can get them back to 3.5, that they can stay there for a long time. The one building that we're probably looking at 5 years, Greg, am I right? Which buildings that may have to tear down later?
Elm building.
But he's trying for 5 years out of it.
Although there's not-
$200,000.
Right, there's not a lot of dollars being put into, the cost, we don't expect it to be a long-term facility, right?
You know, that's what I think this utilization study will tell us. Do we need more new space? Elm, any building can be repaired. But what we're looking at, you know, the way it's presented from the AV Tech side is we need new up-to-date space. So you cannot create new up-to-date space in Elm. We can take the space that's there, we can make it completely inhabitable, we can dry it out, you know, everything working just fine, but it's just still dated space from the 70s. And that may be where the utilization study leads us, is that we stay with dated space from the 70s. You know, who knows?
So, and I know y'all remember this, but the Article 46 money is paying for the major repairs on campus.
Right.
And that's funded at about $2 million a year, about what Greg thinks he can manage in projects. And that moves him through the details. He's outlined in here about which building and which years. This is the piece, you know, counties fund the operations of community college. This is the ongoing major maintenance pieces that you fund that we want to know can maintain the repairs once we've made them all.
Correct.
And then in the process, we want to assess, do they have adequate classroom space? Do they need additional space? And if they do, what's the kind of space we want to design and build that will carry them into the future? And I think that's what Greg's really focused on, working on.
Of course, I'll just bring all this to y'all, and then we'll, into the committee. Marching orders.
He's got a lot more answers that he's got to find for them and everything we need. And that's, you know, that's the one good thing about it. The gentleman is doing a great job, and when it comes to us, if he says 5 years down the road, we got to have a new building, then we can, but it probably won't be 100,000 square foot building, maybe 70 or 80,000 square foot. And then just not just going to say we're just going to go build a building. We're going to build something that's usable and benefits the students and saves the county.
Hey, is that it?
All right, thank you, Greg.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, next up, we have Rick. Talk to us about,
Would it be okay if we take a quick break to get our panelists lined up? Or do you want to just have
sure, we'll take a 3-minute break, or let me just.
Really, 1 minute.
All right, real quick. Hey, Rachel, let's take it.
Welcome back, and it's nice and loud. Ready for our next focus, which is affordable housing. We're excited to do this work session with the Board of Commissioners on housing affordability in Buncombe County. This is similar to the approach that we've taken with other topics on the Board of Commissioners' strategic priorities of late. As a reminder, on the Buncombe County website, buncombecounty.org/commissioners, you can look at information about all of the board's strategic priorities, which were adopted in late 2017. And affordable housing is one of those. As we looked across the community for areas that the county has both needs and opportunities, and Buncombe County government has an opportunity to make an influence. Affordable housing was one of those topics that rose to the top for our board. And the priority as articulated is listed here, that really what we're working toward is comprehensive opportunities for affordable and safe housing as a foundation for the healthy and thriving families and neighborhoods. We know as we have dug into other priority areas among the board's policy agenda items, these are closely linked together: access to high-quality early childhood education and preventing and treating opioid addiction, a thriving and inclusive and diverse workforce are all interconnected, and affordable housing is often framed as a foundational piece to many of these other areas in our community and in the lives of families in our community. So there were some data that were sort of like a call to action. This is not a new, focusing on affordable housing isn't a new conversation for Buncombe County and for Asheville. We've been working with our community partners in lots of different ways over the years. Some things that stood out to us recently are really what we saw around gaps in both affordability and availability of housing. Rent is high and among the highest in North Carolina, and occupancy rates are also really high, so there's a lot of demand. As we go through this information, I'll present on behalf of the strategic team, the strategic priority team that we have at Buncombe County. My name is Rachel Nygaard, and I work as Director of Strategic Partnerships, and in that role I get to convene partners both internally on county staff and externally at community organizations and throughout neighborhoods and other community groups. Those members who are on our staff team around affordable housing, many of whom are represented in the room today, it's been really energetic to be a part of that, because when you think about housing, that's not a topic that any one department can fully own. Planning department is where a lot of our affordable housing work takes place. And you'll hear from the planning director, Nate Pennington, before we move into our panel in a little bit. But when you think about housing affordability, it also ties to tax and ties to permits and inspections, ties to health and human services, our social work services and economic services. It's tied to Office of Sustainability, to our work with homelessness and behavioral health, as well as criminal justice. So as we begin the conversation about affordable housing, I have the opportunity to introduce what it is we mean by affordable housing. In this room today, we're taking a broad and inclusive understanding of affordable housing. But here's a metric that we often hear, is that 30%, no more than 30% of a household's expenses should be going toward their housing costs, or if they're above that, they're cost driven. And that can be true regardless of whether they're somebody who's low income or not. That is a sort of a healthy threshold to stay within. And we'll revisit cost burden in a little bit. There are more technical and specific definitions of what affordable housing means, and it's often tied back to AMI. People who work in the industry know this acronym. It's area median income, and it's often tied to how funding works and how programs work. Affordable housing, as a specific definition, is for households who are at 80% or less of AMI. So for a family of four in our area, that is $49,050. There are a couple categories within affordable housing. It does break down to low income and very low income. And there's also workforce housing, which is a little bit more expansive than the affordable housing definition, and it goes up to 120% of AMI. But the story here is that this is sort of broadly around people's ability to afford their home and the costs to maintain it. So, tying to some of the other work sessions that commissioners have had, we have talked a lot. This is building on our meeting last month around economic forecast and economic stability in the community. We've talked about early childhood education and teachers. We've talked about our first responders, and this is a sample of wages that people make in various of the industries. We know that Buncombe County is experiencing very good employment figures, but we know that our wages are lagging. But many of the information that we saw from Geneva Economics last month, we've got a lot of people working in these lower paid positions. This is another picture of that. So if you took one of those folks like a person who's a certified nurse assistant, a CNA, or a deputy, and turn that into what would be an affordable amount for them to pay on a monthly basis, that leaves, $600 to $950 as what would be affordable for that family if they were a single income family.
Can you back up one slide?
Yes.
So, I think the cost of the remember if someone is seeking home ownership, that includes, for a lot of those folks, that includes taxes, insurance. I mean, they think about monthly payment, that's what they pay. They think about all-in number when they go to qualify,
Yeah.
for purchasing homes.
Mhm. And we'll get in a little bit, we'll look later at how much, how many and how much of tax relief does the county provide to homeowners, and we'll talk a little bit about homeownership as well. Still on the rent side, there's this other, this is another HUD thing, fair market rent, as defined by a highly complicated algorithm, what sort of what the market can bear in fair market rent. I'm not the housing expert, and so when you hear from Heather and David and others on the panel, and Nathan, you may hear more detail on this, but it's tied to programs and funding, how tax credits work and how program eligibility works. But fair market rent is not often what necessarily we see when we go out in the market looking for something that is available to rent.
Sorry, can you go back one? You're
Yeah.
saying, because I thought that's what that was. Are those average fair market rents in this community for those different size units?
It's based on this community. Who feels confident to just explain fair market rent?
I'm not gonna explain HUD's formula, but, because I can't, David might be able to try to do that, but fair market rent is what HUD says is fair market rent for our area.
For our area, those are the fair market rents.
Right, it doesn't have any basis in reality about what rent actually is.
Different than the market rate.
Yeah, completely different than the
We're
market.
using the same word over and over. Is it the market rate
No, so it's.
or actual market or
So
not?
think about it as fair market rent and private market rent. Fair market rent is when we use HUD dollars, that's what we can pay.
They're close to HUD funding for our area.
So the little gut that I had earlier today, should I delete that slide? It's screaming. We have a guest who wanted to offer something, and then we'll continue.
The definition of fair market rent is the 40th percentile rents of non-new units. So they take all the units in the community that are over 2 years old, and they line them up from the lowest to the highest. And when you get up to the 40th percentile, which is well below the median rents, they also publish the median rents of the community.
So 40% of the one-bedroom apartments in Asheville are 660 or lower.
The non-new units.
Of non-new units. Okay,
Thank you.
According to a complicated algorithm that's developed in a non-transparent way by the U.S. Census Bureau and provided to HUD.
Our affordable housing
That
staff.
is a perfect government answer. Thank you.
Yes. Send me over I was asking questions about fair market rent so I could figure out what the most concise ways to summarize it in this room would be, and it really is quite complex.
Can I say
And-
one more thing?
Go ahead, yep.
Okay, so the effect of this is that for a subsidized housing program, either from the Housing Authority Section 8 program, where this really kicks in, or a homeless services and housing program that Homeward Bound or some other agency might be operating, and particularly for Homeward Bound, that's the most that the program can pay for both rent and utilities for families who are participating in that program. So we have some flexibility because of our success rate. We get to start with a higher standard and we get to add 10% to that. So our numbers are a little bit higher than fair market rents, but it's more of a cap than a recognition of market reality. That's the most that the program can pay for gross rent, which includes rent and utilities.
So as we get into the panel later and talk about challenges and opportunities, that is one of the kind of built-in challenges to administering these subsidies. We do have Housing Authority representative, David, who was just speaking. We have a landlord on the panel. We have a recipient, somebody who has shopped for housing using a subsidized voucher. And so that can add more context to this narrative. But what I understand is that median rent is going to be higher than what fair market rent is. That figure for about $1,500 that's on the left side of this is, has been provided from City of Economics, from Zillow Research around median rent of, I think it's across all units within Buncombe County. And so this really just continues to tell that story of the gap in affordability. Transitioning into the home ownership side from the rental side, we know that this can be a really important tool for people to have financial stability and build wealth, and there are a number of services and programs and supports to help encourage people and assist them in becoming homeowners and being successful once they become homeowners. Here's another comparison that shows that gap. Again, we have on one side some example wages if it was a single income household. This red one is AMI, or area median income for a family of 4 for Buncombe, which is that $61,000 figure, compared to what it would take to buy the median priced home sold in Buncombe, which is $275,000, using just a simple rule of thumb that you sometimes hear, that people can afford to purchase home ownership affordability at 3 times their annual salary. Another component of the home ownership piece that's important is to think about housing quality and weatherization. Utility costs are included in that 30%, so if somebody is living in a home that's not efficient, their utility costs can be very high and make that affordability situation more complicated for them. And this is just to kind of point out one of those intersections for commissioners of your priorities. We have Jeremiah's team and the housing team working together on weatherization. And homelessness is an important part. Today is not about homelessness, but it's hard to talk about affordable housing without going into homelessness at least a little bit. Buncombe County serves, along with the City of Asheville and community partners, on the Asheville-Buncombe Homeless Initiative, previously known as the 10-year plan to end homelessness. We started out, back when the plan was first adopted, really focusing on chronically homeless, people who have been homeless for a long period of time, and that is pictured in the red on that chart. And those chronic numbers have declined pretty significantly in our community over time. We've done a great job putting work into place with the permanent supportive housing and having a lot of success with the chronically homeless population, and also strategies just in general. When you look at the strategic priorities that the Homeless Initiative has in our strategic plan at this time, you see a lot of that overlap and that intersection between these needs as well, having health care and employment as critical elements to people's housing stability and ability to avoid homelessness. So a lot happening in the world of homelessness, and could do an entire session on that. We've made good strides, still a lot of work to do. This next set of 13 slides are in the commissioners' packets as a handout. It's also posted on the web page for this meeting on the Board of Commissioners website. This is a housing affordability report that came to us from Tom Tavit, the City of Economics. I put all of the slides in here. We don't need to spend a lot of time with each one, but these are a set of data that tell a good story together. It's a pretty comprehensive look at what housing affordability looks like in Buncombe County. We begin by looking back at that cost burden, that 30% or less that people should be spending toward their housing. I have to turn a little bit because I can't read the fine print on that slide behind you. Roughly a third of the households in Buncombe County are experiencing that cost burden from their housing. And the green part shows renters. That is on the rise. This compares us to the state and to the nation, so this is not a unique characteristic to us right here locally. This is also happening across North Carolina and across the United States. But the growth that we see in that cost burden, while it has stayed pretty stable year to year as a percent of the total population that are cost burdened, the percent that is made up by renters versus by homeowners, you were really seeing a flip there. This is another way to look at cost burden, and it shows percent change. Again, owners separate from renters. And we are a little bit out of the norm in the gold bar in comparison with North Carolina or the nation, and how quickly we're seeing that cost burden rise among renters.
Can you go back to that one real quick?
Yes. What I get from this slide is the way that we remember that cost burden is not just for the very lowest income. Cost burden can be experienced not by just renters and owners, but also by people at any income level. So when people go shopping for an affordable apartment and don't find it, sometimes they take an apartment that is out of their price range, and then other things experience that pinch, their ability to pay for child care, their ability to cover unexpected health costs and other things like that.
To go back,
Yep.
sorry, we don't have to do it this time, but I really don't understand, trying to understand
So
I'm trying to understand the bottom two numbers.
The
35 and the less than.
what I think that how this works is that the black line up and down is 0. So when something is on the right side of it, that means there's growth. That's a number. When it's on the left side, it's decline by income level and also by the color coding. So we've had more, the green on the right side, we're having growing cost burden among renters and declining cost burden among owners in all of the 4 top categories. In the category of earning less, a household of income level less than 20,000, it's declined on both sides.
So
And I
is
don't-
that, I think we need more information on that, because somebody that makes less, I can't imagine somebody making under $20,000, that 887 people now are in better shape when it comes to owning a home, which is the way I'm reading that. They are less cost burden.
Than they used to be.
87. I don't know if those people, came out of the market because they now aren't homeowners and they become renters.
What's driving the decline in cost burden and the lowest in less than 20,000?
Does that mean does that mean they lost a home and went to rental? I don't know what that.
I don't know the answer either, but Julie's capturing it on our items for follow-up, so we'll talk to Tom about the data source and try to understand more about it. I'm afraid you might ask hard questions about this slide too, but here's what I think it is telling us. Yellow. This is a percent change slide. So the cost of housing, this is on the home ownership side, so median home value is rising. So are wages. But wages are not rising as quickly, not keeping pace. This is a snapshot of median home value, Buncombe compared to other counties, and we're in the top 5, it looks like.
That's okay, that's right. That's yellow.
It's home value.
Home value.
The rent one looks just like that.
So on both those slides, there's only 4 counties higher than this.
Looks like 5, because there's one over to the side, kind
Oh,
of.
that's an improvement.
And that's where that 1449 figure came from on median rent.
Okay, thanks.
This index talks about, of the homes that have been sold, what would have been affordable to a family with an average area median income, not average AMI. And the thing to point out is where there are 2 percentages listed, has declined from 74% to 58% over that time frame since 2012. The note does point out that this is consistent with trends nationally. Home sales, this is by quarter, so there's the seasonality. There's going to be some up and down to make that line jagged, but home prices are on the rise. So as opposed to that medium home value, this is listed as a average sales price. So it's going to be higher because the average doesn't cut out those outliers like a median would, and it's the sales price, so it's listing for $361,000. This is a picture of percent change in the average sales price. And essentially the summary here in comparison with homes sold is that we have strong demand and limited supply. Anyone who has purchased a house recently or talked to anyone who has purchased a house has anecdotes in mind of how quickly people are hustling when there's something that's listed, how people are offering bids that are above list price. People are stepping into that cost burden zone so that they can get the home that they need. This is a picture of permits. I think we may have seen this in the economic overview info last month, but essentially we have seen some steady growth in the multifamily, a big year in 2016 and also again in 2017 in multifamily. So more housing stock being created. Next. This is another look at kind of the supply and demand picture. Estimating the amount of housing demand by population growth in comparison to permits, showing that there's a gap, more people than units. Click that off real quick so no one could ask a hard question. But we can go back and revisit any of this. Tom DeViet with Geneva, who prepared this data for us, is available. So what we're going to do next is I'll hand the podium over to Nathan Pennington, the planning director for Buncombe County, who will talk us through Buncombe County's current partnerships and investments. And then we will transition to our panel, and I'll introduce them at that time.
Good afternoon, everyone. Chair, commissioners, members of the public. Nathan Pennington, planning director. I have with me Cynthia Fox-Clark and Donna Cottrell. They're our in-house housing experts, if you will. So I may ask them a question from time to time, or if you have any questions, you may ask them as well.
Hey, Nate.
Yes, sir.
Before you get started, I would just like to say congratulations on the planning position, and we're excited to have you there.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. These are basically our strategic goals based on the, affordable housing being one of your 6 pillars. Just wanted to throw those up there real quick. We've already talked about most of these highlights here. So all county money for affordable housing is administered through the planning department. Our goals here are 7,061,580 new rental units, 163 of those stand for single family homes. Another one of our goals is the reduction of substandard housing. And of those, we do a number of things in the umbrella of affordable housing services, including emergency repairs. This is a very popular program. There's 26 upcoming and there's 56 on the waiting list. We contract with MHO and Habitat to help us with this service. We also support home ownership. The ultimate goal being to get folks into the role of owning a home. And we support that by doing down payment assistance That's actually a loan, but it supports the goal of homeownership. And we also do tenant-based rental assistance. And this program, it averages about $1,500 per person or per family. And the goal here is moving expenses, utilities, security deposits, things of that nature. This is another way to look at affordable housing and the different programs that we administer. One of the specific projects is the Eagle Market, 32 units. The county's contribution is $2 million on that. The planning program is just a count, and these numbers tend to be more impact driven, not specifically that we're funding each individual unit at its full cost. We have the behavioral health, that includes Homeward Bound, Project Rebound, the strategic partnership grants. These are home repair. It's an adjunct service. It's more of a technical service. We also have the Health and Human Services, which is emergency assistance. The weatherization we've talked a little bit about before, and a state program is tax relief. So the reason that one's so high is it's basically it's the elderly exemption program, and that's basically a state law, but it does show you how much of an impact there is right here in Buncombe County.
Nate, the figures that you gave, that's on just 2018 county funds. Where the slide before, those represent projects that impact since 2018. They may not match your
Which happens to be the inception of basically the modern program that we have with the county. So under that Affordable Housing Services Program, here's just a couple examples. Again, we have the down payment assistance, emergency home repair, construction of new homes. That's actually a Habitat project right there. Nice sunny day, everyone's happy. The Home Investment Partnership Program, this is a program that includes Buncombe, Henderson, Transylvania, and Madison County, and the municipalities throughout, and it's administered through the city of Asheville. Heather Dillashaw, of course, is our expert on that program. It's a competitive process, and at a planning level, on average, 330,000 to about 340,000 has been our historical average that comes to the county from that program. We'd like to showcase a couple of projects. We'll get into detail on these, and we actually have experts in this room and members of each of the groups that can speak in more detail if you have specific questions. The Williams Baldwin Teacher Housing. Okay, so for those that might be familiar, this is a collaboration with the State Employees Credit Unions, Evelyn Charities, Buncombe County, and both school systems for Buncombe County and the city of Asheville. One person has described it as smart housing because it actually focuses on a particular sector, and in this case, it's our local teachers. And it's the first of its kind in this area, but not the first of the kind in the state. There are a couple towards the eastern part of the state that also are geared towards certain sectors. East Haven Apartments, this is a mountain housing opportunity project. It's one of the first projects that's utilized a new zoning tool called the Community-Oriented Development. And what that does is it provides a menu for developers to choose from. It includes things like providing smart housing, green building techniques, and in this case, it took advantage of a transit corridor. The reason that's important is the county right now, if you drive out to Swannanoa, is constructing 2 bus stops, one on the Ingalls side and one at the project site. They should have the pads poured, and we should be putting up the shelters very soon. This is important to mention because it utilizes local funds to leverage more larger pots of money. So for the local match here, you get state and federal funds, and they're able to get tax credits as well. Another one's been the Eagle Market Street, which is nearing completion right here in downtown Asheville. Matches from city and county, and it gets 62 units, 30 workforce, and 32 affordable. Lee Walker Heights, this has been one that's come to the commissioners lately for a presentation. David Nash is here. He can speak in more detail about this project. Especially when it comes to the tax credits themselves, which include, again, the local match to get to some of the larger pots of money to make a project like this happen. So at this point, I'm going to turn it back over to Rachel to introduce our panel.
Are there any questions for Nate before we transition to our panel? Thank you for being here. We have Heather Dillashaw from the City of Asheville Community Development Director, David, Chief Operating Officer David Nash from the Housing Authority, Greg Borum, who is with Children First, Director of Advocacy, Children First Communities and Schools of Buncombe County, as well as another hat, which is a collaborative that Children First spearheads called the Success Equation, which is a group of many different community partners that come together on issues impacting families and children, including housing. Kevin King, who is a building contractor, and Kirk Booth, who represents the landlord perspective. We hope that Tiffany McCants is able to slip in. She is the resident manager at the Williams Baldwin Teacher Campus. And finally, Dewana Little, who's a community representative, bringing her expertise to our panel today. So thank you for all of you being here. And this is we'll give each panelist an opportunity to share for about 5 minutes, just kind of high-level things that stand out to you as opportunities and challenges. Those of you from organizations, if there are updates that you want to include in that, please do. And then once we've had a chance to hear from the panelists, we'll have time for some question and answer as well as discussion. Heather? It's up to you. We can start seated and see if you speak up, if everyone's able to hear you well. There was a little problem with the microphones in the room, so let's try it and see if our backup plan can be coming to the mic.
Thanks, Rachel, and thank you, commissioners, for the opportunity to be here. I'll highlight just a couple of updates from the city's perspective and how we are moving forward in our housing affordability initiatives. As you're aware, voters did pass a housing bond referendum for affordable housing in 2016, and that has enabled us to start implementing many of the strategies that we have had on our plate but not had the capital to do as much with, including expanding our housing trust fund, which is allowing us to work with more private and nonprofit developers for more projects at a time. Prior to the housing bond, our housing trust fund was $500,000 per year, which doesn't give us the opportunity to invest in more than one project per year. So hopefully this will allow us to expand that. The council will be considering 2 applications to that fund this week, actually. The 2 other things that I'd like to highlight is, one, we're continuing our partnerships with the affordable housing providers we've been working with. The other key thing that we're working on is looking at our city-owned property for redevelopment for affordable housing. One of the things that we learned over the last few years of research and looking at how other cities have worked on this initiative is that one of the key things that municipalities can do is provide land debt-free as equity or otherwise into a project, whether that's in a high-cost area, like, for example, the Central Business District, where land is the most expensive. Not that land isn't expensive elsewhere in Asheville and Buncombe County, but that's where it tends to be most expensive. We own property in the Central Business District. The project that you may have seen started at the corner of Hilliard and Klingman. It used to have buildings on it. It's now a vacant piece of property. We'll have a 64-unit mixed income development breaking ground in the next couple of months. So that's how we are looking at using our certain parcels of city-owned property. We are looking at 3 sites that we hope will be much higher impact than that. They're bigger sites. We're looking at the South Charlotte Street corridor, where we currently have city facilities that could potentially be an area for affordable housing. 319 Biltmore, which is the former Matthews Ford site, and then a parcel that we own on Riverside Drive. One of the reasons we're looking at those properties is so that we can utilize the other development that's happening where those properties are located. For example, the Biltmore Avenue site, Mission Hospital, Job Center, transportation, access to various kinds of things, the opportunity for mixed use closer to the Biltmore side of that property. So we're trying to look at meeting multiple city goals so that residents that are utilizing these properties have access to the things that they need, which also contributes to affordability. I don't remember which commissioner said something about the expenses that go into what it means for affordability, the transportation, how long does it take for you to get to a job, all of those things matter when it comes to what is affordable. And so if we can locate housing that are close to job centers, that are close to transportation, then the opportunities for economic mobility rise exponentially for folks, not just because they don't have access to transportation perhaps in other places, but because the access to a job is much more immediate. So we're trying to look at the pieces of property that we own that will afford those opportunities. And if what we're using those pieces of property for now are not the highest and best use, how can we redevelop those, move whatever is there to a better place? So that's the key piece that we're working on now, and where we plan to spend a great deal of those bond funds. The other piece, Commissioner Whitesides has been part of this effort. This is really focused on homeownership, is the establishment of a community land trust that is focused on homeownership for low to moderate income households. The idea of a community land trust is if you control the land, you control permanent affordability. And so the land becomes permanently affordable to help. This is simpler, right, than what the formula actually is, but right, the community land trust as an entity owns the land, but the homeowner owns the house. And while the resale formula would be different than if you were in the private market, equity is still built, and it allows home ownership at a level that we do not have the ability to attain in the Asheville market right now. As you saw those median home prices, those are not attainable for most folks at 100% area median income or below. And so the community land trust is a tool to add some possibility of affordability for households at a lower level than 120% and above, which is where homeownership is right now. So those are the things we're concentrating on right now. We are continuing, as I said, our other partnerships through both, Nate mentioned the home program that we administer in partnership around the region, with tenant-based rental assistance to house homeless households, working with Mountain Housing Opportunities, Asheville Habitat, and other smaller developers to do those projects. We continue to do those things, but we really are seeing the most momentum and the most impact being able to happen through using our assets to leverage for affordability. And we've seen case studies across the country where this has been where the biggest impact has come. So that's our biggest opportunity right now. The biggest challenge, of course, is development cannot keep pace with the need, and so the development of those units coming out of the ground is still a couple of years away, and we need units now for vouchers and things like that. So we know it's not the answer to everything, but hopefully in the next 5 to 6 years we'll see some impact for those units getting built.
Do power on that before, not city.
They do want it. We have an option to purchase on that property.
Well, you've been there 3 or 4 years, so we want to take it that too.
We haven't had it for 3 or 4 years. So we have an option on that property, and we're in the due diligence period with it right now.
Good songs.
Correct.
My turn? Okay. You have some information in your packets. I won't go through all the statistics, but we administer about 3,500 units. We either own, manage, or provide subsidies for about 3,500 units, which means 3,500 families, a total of between 6,000 and 7,000 people in the Asheville and Buncombe County. Our average income range is about $10,000 per family per year, which is about 2/3 of the minimum wage full-time job. The total subsidies that we administer, so federal funds that we draw down to pay for our own programs and for private landlords, totaled about $18 million a year that we're bringing in to the local economy in terms of funds. Our population across all programs is roughly 50% black, 50% white. We have a very large number of disabled families, people with an adult disabled member, sometimes single individuals, sometimes families. But about 40% of our families are considered people with disabilities. We've talked about the Lee Walker Heights project. I think it is it's a good model of what we can all do when we join hands and try to put a package together. A couple of years ago, when we first started thinking about that, we said we have not accessed the 4% tax credit program in the way that we should have, in part because our median rents are high, but our median incomes are low, and that formula makes it difficult to build a new development based on the 4% tax credit program. I can't go into all the details. If I tried, I would botch it up. But what we've determined locally is that if we have about $20,000 a unit, with inflation now, it could be closer to 25 for future projects from both the county and the city. So $40,000 to $50,000 per unit. And that can leverage those 4% tax credit investors, and that would build a unit of permanently affordable housing, tied to a program that the owner is required to keep it, legally required to keep it affordable for 30 years, but as a practical matter, if it's owned by a government entity or a nonprofit, it's going to be permanently affordable. So the dollar amount on that is, if it's $20,000 a unit, we can do 100 units a year in Buncombe County, 100 new units a year in Buncombe County for about $2 million each from the city and the county. That might be $2.5 million each from the city and the county, as I said. But that is a relatively low-cost way to leverage some real resources that we have been underutilizing in this community in the long term. And we really need those physical units that are permanently affordable. The rents are low, which means they're affordable in general to people who are in the workforce, the lower wage workforce. It also means the rents are low enough that those fair market rents will cover them. It means that we would not have to struggle as hard for our residents, would not have to struggle as hard to find a tenant-based unit, because there would be more out there that are protected and required to take Section 8 positions. So I think if there's one item I would leave you with in terms of my presentation, it's that if we could find dedicated funding sources on the city side, perhaps from the Housing Trust Fund, or bond funds, on the county side, a penny per $100 of tax value, as I understand it, raises about $3.6 million. So if we could do a penny, if we as a community, you all have to vote for it, but we as a community have to support it, to do a penny per 100 for affordable housing, then we would be above that goal of 100 units a year. And the developers in this country, that's all I have, unless there are questions.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you today. I've worked with Children First Communities and Schools, and we are not a housing developer. We don't build houses, but we build children's futures. And we got into advocacy for housing affordability because of our work with children and families in schools and in after-school programs across the community. We've seen firsthand how housing stability is a big factor, a big cornerstone piece to how well children are going to succeed in school and health outcomes and all of that. I'm really grateful to so many people in this room who've helped me get up to speed around housing issues, because it's not my background. And as Rachel mentioned, we've been convening what we call our Success Equation Initiative for about the past 4 years, pulling together a roundtable of other allied organizations and community advocates to brainstorm, to learn from each other, and to come out with ideas for policy recommendations at the local level. Some of our partners like On Track and Homeward Bound, Habitat, Fiscal Legal in the room, big thanks to process. Big thanks to y'all, the work that you've done as a county on stepping forward around housing affordability, as we've seen from those slides. You have a great track record, and you've definitely put up a lot of investment in this effort. And I think this conversation is also an exciting opportunity to consider kind of what's next. The success equation, I want to highlight kind of 3 areas of kind of policy thinking that we've had just to kind of see the conversation today. The first really kind of jumps off on what we've already heard is that we really need units out there. We have to get this deficit, and we think there's a real need for our local governments to be strategic and kind of where do we want to be in our community in the next 5, 8, 10 years in terms of housing production. What does it look like in terms of rental ownership, and how are we going to get there in terms of leveraging local funds with federal funds with private development and partnership, because it's going to take all of that. We really stress that in that scenario, as we heard from David, that permanent affordability is key. So that we make sure that the stuff that we build now is going to be around as affordable for years to come. It's crucial in our sense of what good policy to look like. And it needs to be housing that's connected to jobs, to schools, to grocery stores, and health centers, other community things. One policy that we really liked as a success equation has been the city's housing trust fund. Having that kind of local control is a real gift. So much of the housing dollars have so many different strings and regulations attached, as these folks well know. But having the city's housing trust fund, the city is really in the driver's seat on how they set the policy, set the priorities, allocate. And that's a real gift and a real, I think, bonus of local governments thinking about how they're putting funds aside and kind of building that fund for affordable housing. And the other thing that has already been mentioned is the whole issue of land repurposing. That's another policy strategy that Success Equation has been excited to see the city exploring. I think has a real immediate opportunity for the county too, to look at the land resources we have as a leverage point to affordable issues. The second broad policy area I want to highlight is what we've been kind of calling the front door, back door approach. So what we see is that in this housing market, there's a lot of barriers for people to get into the front door of housing. And then unfortunately, we're not keeping that back door closed. A lot of people are exiting through evictions and such. And as you see from your slides, the county does have experience in working in that space in some of your youth services programs and your level assistance programs. But I think as a community, we need to think strategically around that, and how can we remove barriers like criminal records, eviction cases, credit problems that put barriers into that front door. So as we're working to increase more units in the community, we've got folks in this community who can get in those doors and access those units. And then on the other side, last year, Fiscal Legal Services brought the author of Matthew Desmond for their poverty summit. If you weren't there, if you haven't read the book, if you haven't heard that, just this whole kind of epidemic of evictions, I think really caught our attention, and I think there's a lot of space for the county, the city, this community to be imaginative in ways that we can begin to close that back door so more people are coming out of it, because once that eviction cycle starts, I think it's what we've seen with the research, it's really hard to kind of get back into good, safe, stable housing. So that's the front door, back door strategy. And then the third piece that I just put out there, this needs constant conversation. And like I said, I'm not a housing expert, but I'm passionate about having the spaces that we can keep talking about what's needed for housing in our community. And I think that the city has done a good job of really supporting their Affordable Housing Advisory Committee as a constant conversation space. A lot of rabbit holes have been out there, but they're all worth exploring because we shouldn't leave any stone unturned. And so I would just say that this is great to see the city, the county, in this space, identifying this as a strategic goal. Thank you, and let's all work together to make sure that communication, that constant conversation is going on, so we can unearth zoning policies and issues around manufactured mobile homes, everything, leave this stone unturned, and especially just want to call out too, that housing in this community also has a big conversation around disparities and who can access it and who can't, who is building both for our community, who's being left behind. And that should definitely be part of our conversation with that space. And I thank you for your time, and thanks to everyone who's helped me learn along the way.
I appreciate the opportunity to speak today. My name's Kevin King. I've been a builder in Buncombe County for 30 years. I'm just a small private builder, 6, 8, 10 houses a year. And over the last few years, the challenges have grown as far as our biggest challenge is small rural builders are the problem. In the past, I've utilized special subdivisions, 2 or 3 acre pieces of property, where I can go in, there's no infrastructure to put in, and I can build affordable houses on 2 to 3 acre tracts of land without a lot of stormwater planning or anything else that is involved in it. If you move to a larger development in rural areas, it becomes not at all cost effective. You cannot take the rural areas and what property costs in Buncombe County are now and make it work. The special subdivision, which is 3, that keeps you from having to do a minor or a major subdivision. And we're no longer being able to do those without an extended period of time that we have to wait on. So what you're seeing in the county is, and this has just started recently, so property costs for any 1 acre, 2 acre parcel of land in Buncombe County is, when it goes up for sale, it's a feeding frenzy. Everybody is a bidding war to try to get 1, 2, 3 acres of property to where it doesn't have to be developed into a major or a minor subdivision. Your bigger tracts of property in the rural Buncombe County are cheap because developers and builders know that when you go out to those areas of the county, it's not profitable for them. It's not sustainable to build a 100-lot subdivision in north or the west end of the county. It just doesn't work. It doesn't. So what we're seeing is there's a big gap in small tracts of land, big tracts of land, what we can do with them by the time we navigate stormwater, erosion control. After building here for 30 years, it's getting so much harder that there's a lot of builders in Buncombe County that build the way I do. There are small builders that are leaving Buncombe County. They build cost-effective houses. If they're moving to Haywood, moving to Jackson, or moving to other counties where the cost of land is more conducive to them being able to do business and stay in business.
Landlording, I got the easy one, so thank you. I've been in real estate for 25 years, and the most rewarding part of it is seeing someone's face when they found a house. You bought a house before, you found the rental house you wanted, you got that look, you know what you want, you finally see it, let's go buy it, where do I sign the lease, what do I have to do to get in it? And all these things that we've talked about, from planning to vouchers to helping out to building, now I've got the person ready to go in the house. So what do we do now? So we have what I use as a real estate rental platform on the internet where they can log in, tenant can log in, put an application, we receive the application, we do a background check, credit check, see if they can afford it, per the numbers, all the algorithm numbers and different things that you have to do to see if they can get in the house. One of my great things that I learned a long time ago was a voucher. What is a voucher? Section 8, what does this mean? Oh, you don't want to do that. If you ask the old school people, they may say you don't ever want to do that. Those people will tear your place up. Well, let me tell you, anybody will tear your place up. So you have to make sure that you state the rules and know what it is, get the right deposits, and and make sure everything goes. Everybody's got a rental horror story of what happened at that time with that one tenant. So as a landlord, we want to make sure that our tenants stay as long as possible, because we're here to either rent the property for other people, rent it for ourselves, manage it for someone, and that usually means it's tied to money. So how can we keep the money coming? That is to keep the tenant there. If I can tell you a cost breakdown on a 3-bedroom, a 2-bedroom, a 1-bedroom turn for every rental, how long they've been there, what it's going to cost to make that happen, how long is it going to take to re-rent it, and how much money is the owner going to lose. So we have these little helpers called a Section 8 voucher, in which that person has help from someone. If they start to get in trouble, they lost their job, they don't know what to do, they can call their worker. The worker can help them. Hey, I thought you'd come into the office. How about we sit down together and talk to your landlord and make sure you don't get evicted? Because eviction's not fun for me, it's not fun for others or anything else in that process, because why? It costs money. It costs me money as a property manager, it costs money for the owners, it costs money for the tenant, it costs time. So with your Section 8 voucher, if these things come up, then we may have a solution that requires that eviction process may not happen. Other things with Section 8 voucher is we have inspections. They have inspectors actually come out to the property and look at it. Some people don't actually like that because they may have to spend money to keep the unit up. I personally enjoy a free inspection to my house where I can go in and look at it, make sure everything's the way it should be. How are you living in the house? Tenants are living there. Are you tearing it apart? Are you okay with it? What needs fixing? You didn't call me about that one thing and now it's a problem. Whatever it is, it gives an opportunity for the owner to kind of have a guideline or a benchmark. Other helpers in this room are Homeward and other organizations that basically provide help to the tenant to prevent the dreaded eviction, which I mentioned before, there's no one in here. So Homeward Bound can come in, help the person, talk to them, what happened? Why are you going off the rails? Did you lose your job? Did something happen with your family? Whatever it may be, we're all people. We all have issues that come up. The main thing is that we don't want you to lose your housing because of the issue. So how can we resolve that? I work with several organizations. I like working with organizations for these reasons. We want to provide a nice place to live, and help the tenants stay there as long as you can. We try to make sure we work in the guidelines. If we receive funding from the city or the county, to make sure we're meeting all the marks that we're supposed to, and to also make sure any owners we represent, that their interests are looked at. So it's kind of just a human nature connection, communication, I think is the biggest thing that resolves a lot of problem is open line communication. It's true probably with the vouchers, you saw a slide earlier that half the people who may get a voucher, they have 90 days to place it. You know, it takes work to rent a house. If you're renting a house, especially in this town, you've got to call people, you have to wait, call back, you have to follow up because you missed them. And then what do I have to do to get in there? Do I have to work out the application? What's your requirements? What kind of deposit do I have to put down? It's a lot of work. And sometimes people get frustrated and they lose it because they can't get any traction. So we try to help provide everyone that's wanting to get in a house. I've developed quite a few houses with your help as a county, the city's help, and try to provide the tools where the tenants can get in there and get their questions and problems handled as quickly as possible.
I'm Dawana Little, and I'm here as a community member, which is kind of great. So, I guess I'm going to speak to my experience as a renter in Asheville, and I'm currently under nationally rated. But trying to transition now that I am at an income level to where I do want to own, has been a struggle. And a lot of my friends in the community who are also at this level, it has been a challenge just to navigate through the systems of financing, making sure I credit. There's really no roadmaps that to home ownership, to wealth building, because that's really how I look at it is, I'm building wealth for my family. By exploring this option, and it's just really no roadmap to me. I'm grateful that I'm in a position where I'm surrounded by people that I can pull on and ask questions, throw stuff at, and they go back at me, and I got a lot of a strong support network, but most people in my community are not in that situation and does not have the access to those resources, so affordable housing is an issue, but I really would like to caution this rental focus on rentals, because a lot of us want to own, especially the marginalized communities of Buncombe County. People that are living within those communities who have worked hard to change their situation, to better their financial standing, to better their households. We do want ownership because that is a wealth generator. And a lot of times in these affordable housing conversations, is we need more how we need the most use for that piece of property. And I get that. I'm also an affordable housing producer, so I drastically get that. And so it's like, where's the balance when natives and people that actually live here and work here, we multi-generations of our families in this area have grown up this intergenerational, and we don't have the opportunity to own and live in the community that our family is. And not everywhere we work, we live and play. We can't afford it. So I see a lot of people moving to Charlotte. A lot of people who graduated with me, they got their college degrees instead of coming back home and sharing those talents and skills and resources here. When they came back, it was nothing that they couldn't afford to stay here. So now those tools are gone, which further marginalizes the already marginalized community, because now we don't see too many people that look like us representing us in the professional field. There's no roadmap. And that's something that I'm grateful for the community land trust, which I'm also a part of. And what they're trying to do is, let's develop the roadmap to wealth building, to home ownership. Let's not just focus on home ownership, but let's have rentals as a stepping stone. This your entry rate. Let's put timelines on how long you can be in a rental before you start transitioning to rent to own, or whatever that looks like for you when we start looking at the ownership component. Let's work on your credit. Let's talk about these things that we just don't talk about. Like, I didn't know I needed, like, I knew credit was a thing, kinda. It wasn't a glaring thing because I didn't ever apply for anything that I needed credit for, and that's at 30 years old. I had never applied for anything that I needed credit to obtain. So when it's like, now that I'm in a better situation to move into a home, now it's like, well, your credit score, why does that matter? Look, I don't pay for all this stuff, I own most of my stuff, but it does matter, and if people don't know that certain things matter that we just don't talk about. Building your credit score, how do you navigate the financial systems? For people of color and I think this kind of, it's like a myth, oh, that was a long time ago type of thing. It's not a long time ago situation for us when we go into these banks and these financial institutions and want to apply for loans to get home ownership. Whether you're a first-time home buyer or it's your 10th house. It is a challenge. And you hear no more than you hear yes. 99% of the time, you barely hear yes unless you're working with an organization like Mountain Housing, Habitat Housing, or some of these subsidy organizations that's really not looking at that. So it's the pathway for people to help navigate you through those systems, because you will give up. You will feel like it's not worth it. Because when you really look at your affordability, our affordability and how we look at our household is not the national standard. It's not the HUD standard. It's not, our household is, okay, when I first moved into housing, I didn't have a job, so my rent was $50. It was great. Paid all the utilities, perfect. But then I got a job because I wasn't comfortable not being able to provide the other things my household needed. So I went and got a job. Oh, my rent increased a little bit. I got an escrow account. Told me saving money is my rent increase, which is a great program that has. And so I was able to I knew I would save money even though my rent had increased. I still had my food stamps, I still had my Medicaid, which was subsidizing some of my household needs. When I got a pay raise or I got a promotion at work, my rent increased, now I done lost my Medicaid, now I done lost my food stamps. And now that burden is on my household. Health insurance is like rent. To be able to afford health insurance, and I don't know who is experiencing this or not, but realistically, to be able to afford health insurance that is not provided by your job, you're not being stipend for your job for health care. It's rent. For me and my one son, I'm paying $250. Like, the cost burden is bigger than, oh, they make this amount of money. It's not just that black and white. Even with my friends that's in sliding scale fee units, when their income increase, they rent increase as well, but also their expenses increase. So it's like you at a place where you want to do better. You moved up professionally, but personally you taking steps back because you can't afford to manage all of it. It's like, yeah, you get, thank you, good job, you got a promotion, you're doing the things that we want you to do, but the expenses that are piled on top of that, and that's not even the everyday expenses of being a parent. That's just, oh, now you got your insurance, now you got these other things that's piled on top of that. It makes it unaffordable to live, even if, like I had to say, sometimes even in public housing. Because while your rent might be low, the other expenses are so much greater. I did a budget for a year and I was in the black every month. My rent was low, but the other expenses I couldn't afford. So it was like, we're gonna drink water this month because all month, because we trying to cut some expenses. Like, seriously, like, okay, we're not gonna go to after school this month. You're not gonna be able to do the basketball thing this month or after school this month because I gotta balance out my expenses. And so our kids are suffering in the process of us trying to balance out the expenses of trying to live. And Asheville and Buncombe County is just not realistic. The math that you're using to come up with the numbers is not realistic. The cost of living here is just it's high, and the incomes does not match, especially for people of color. Lisa Eby did a wonderful presentation to the county last week, and talked about, a week before last, and talked about, like, when you really look at the income per household, when you really divide it by race, because race is an issue, and it's something that you can't even overlook even in affordable housing. It's not just policy, race matters. And when you go in to apply for these places to live, it matters. When they looking at your application, it matters. What my name look like on that paper matters. And people, like, I think we get to this place where we act like the race don't matter, and it do. Because we live in it every day. Even in all the hats that I wear and the great work that I do in my community, my skin color don't change, no matter what table I'm sitting at. And it matters. So when you look at income, our income is nowhere near the white income. By tens of thousands of dollars, and that's just ridiculous for us to live in the same community. For me to be sitting beside a white coworker and we doing the same job and living in the same community, working in the same place, and for them to be making $10,000 more a year than me, when we doing the same work at the same quality, I might even have more experience. That's a problem, and in fact, it impacts the way I look at affordable housing. So I would like to say that at the end of the day, look at the programs that's supporting people on that pathway to get into a place of credit. They working with them on credit building. OnStrength is amazing. I love them. They certified me for my first time home buyers loan. It's kind of awesome. So, and their program is awesome. So I went through it. I can speak from experience. But look at these programs and these organizations that's really trying to help people get to where they need to be, where some of these barriers won't be an issue. And affordable housing is just a lack of resources. We just don't have that much housing here. And people love Asheville. I love Asheville. I moved away, I came back. You know what I'm saying? People love Asheville, so it's not a shock that we have an affordable housing issue. It's just a shock that most of the people that are mostly impacted by it are people who are residents of Asheville who have been here for multiple generations. That's the people that's really feeling the brunt of this, not the new people, the tourists or the people that's coming to town just for a winter, for the winter, because they like the snow. Like, we here year round, we not going nowhere, and we the ones that's really experiencing the impacts of this affordable housing crisis. We the ones that's really feeling it.
So that is the end of our prepared agenda for the board. We don't have our chair in his seat helping shepherd us along, so I'll kind of turn it to vice chair and other commissioners. We have until 4 o'clock, no later than 4. It's up to you if you want to stay that long. We have time for question and answer of our panelists or presenters. And then particularly, please share with us anything that you would like more information about or follow up on. I want to give one quick advertisement, and I'm wondering if Jim Holland wants to do this, for the Board of Commissioners work session that's happening in April, in a way that the affordable housing discussion built on our economic discussion. This April session about infrastructure and development, we think will build on today's affordable housing conversation.
Okay, so can you back up?
Yep.
I'm sorry, to the picture.
To the pictures.
Yeah. So while the water is troubled this morning, as Ms. Little did and stirred it, and I thank you for your conversation. I would enjoy more conversation. I would also like to address the planning department as well as the rest of the commissioners. We have discussed whether it's land trust, Ms. Dillashaw, Mr. Bourne, you mentioned factory-built manufactured housing. Ms. Little passionately mentioned a path to equity, a path to home ownership, a path to independence. There are national organizations that help, they're not just within Buncombe County, that help with homeowner education, the things that you said that most of us were not taught. And being 30 years old and not knowing X, Y, and Z, about home ownership. The only reason that I knew it is I grew up in the industry. I didn't know it when my wife and I first bought a little single wide in 1975. We into a little manufactured home park. Tickled to get it. Even though in the wintertime we would sit and watch the wind blow through the crank-out windows. I only paid $100 a month in electricity though. That same house would cost $500, but I don't want to get into all that. And I'm not going to get on my high horse because I can. And if I did, 4 o'clock is not enough time. We could not continue, whether it's within the city or the county, to ignore factory-built housing as an option, countywide, citywide. You want to develop a land trust with affordable homes, you can do 20 units for under $100,000 each. Completely done. The only reason they're not being done is they're not allowed. Ms. Little is not having the opportunity to take that next step, of independence because of the inventory. There's equity in education, but there's also the accessibility of inventory. When you get into the outlying areas, Mr. King, I know you know this, whether it's Candler or Lester, Swananoa, or Avery Street, when you get out to where the land might, Avery Street may not fit the bill, but Warrenville, other places where you get to where the land is more affordable, and you run into the development costs. But the other thing that people run into out there is their mom and dad may have a piece of property that they're willing to sell reasonable, or they might even want to give it to their children. Then they go downtown, or they go to
Buncombe County to get their permit, and they like to put a new, energy efficient, 1,500 square foot manufactured home, that the waste of it can be put in a 50-gallon garbage can and go into the landfill instead of 4 or 5 dumpster loads. And I'm probably exaggerating on dumpster loads, and I apologize if I am, and I'm not. Okay. Good. You go into the landfill, and they go in, and they because we've expanded in areas like Swannon and West Asheville towards Lester, and R1 and R2s kind of went out like that, and they're sitting on a piece of property and look across the street and see a 1985 manufactured home. Then they go to get a new construction, green, energy efficient home. And they say, no, I'm sorry, you can't put that on your land. Something's wrong with that. So we got to fix it. And and we're hearing different people advocating for that. You know, oh my goodness, you mentioned Pisgah Legal. Pisgah Legal was here, they tell you the same thing.
I am here.
Oh, y'all here, so you would say the same thing. We had somebody come in our meeting, a young Hispanic lady that had an interpreter that talked about manufactured home parts, which can be different today than they were 30 years ago. You can actually go in and do 30 or 40 of them if you wanted to, and provide an affordable home for her. She said that we're getting rid of the places where I can live. So I'm gonna stop there. But, you know, we've got to move forward with this. You know, I would think you've got enough support on the board to look at new construction, multi-section, you know, placing those and allowing them countywide with certain, if it's deed restricted, it's deed restricted. You know, but there are places where we can do this. We need to move forward. It needs to be part of the conversation. Because of what Ms. Little passionately said, I could have never said it any better. You know, a path to equity is a path to home ownership is a path to independence for a lot of people. You sat there and said that I would like to have that opportunity. And in Buncombe County, a lot of folks go to the west. A lot of people go to South Carolina to do that, whether it's York County, Mecklenburg, Charlotte. A lot of people go to Charlotte, but they're also there around, you know, Blacksburg, York, Chester, some of those areas there where they don't have it. That's not an issue. They have an easier opportunity to move on and on. But I would encourage you to look at some of the national things. We need to, as a board, look at some of the national. I heard a plea for home education, and there's a lot of great organizations. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac has a duty to serve. They can't just provide, you know, loans that's taxpayer funded to people that are in mid-high and high income. They have to go to the underserved, and they're required to do that. And part of their partnerships are with some of these home buyer education national nonprofits, and they are not credit repair agencies. That's not what they are. They show you a path to down payment assistance. They show you a path on how long you should be on a job or what you need to do. There's a lot of that out there. So I encourage, you know, whoever is listening and whoever is taking notes of the press to make sure that people know that. And I will bless you. I was so looking forward to that.
I think, you know, the elephant that has been in the room for a long time now is the very fact that a black person and a white person in Asheville, Buncombe County can have the same job, and the black person will make $1,000 less a month at that job. This is such a complicated thing, but the basic fact, there's not equity right now. We talk about generations of folks. We're losing generations and generations of families. But I think we're second in the nation in gentrification. Until we wrap our head around that stuff, all this stuff is going to be staggered. It's just, the inequities are mind-boggling, and we can keep talking about it or do something about it.
I'd like to thank county staff who are working really hard on the strategic priorities day in, day out, but also to thank all the panelists today for your work, and then the many other folks in the room from the MHO, the Homeward Bound, a lot of other organizations that have already been named and are represented. I had a question, Ms. Gilshaw, I think we'll start with you. Would love to hear from any other panelists. I'm particularly interested in identifying whether there's some actionable items that the county can add into the work that's already underway, either to supplement existing strategies or to consider some new strategies. And was particularly interested in, it sounded like you said that the leveraging city-owned assets is proving sort of an area where you're finding a lot of momentum. And Mandy, please, if you want to chime in as well, but could you just talk to us sort of about how y'all have gone from saying, this is a strategy or this is a strategy we're using occasionally into, it sounds like a much more robust, focused, this is an area where we want to run the wall.
Sure. The City Council adopted it as a strategic priority in 2015 and directed staff to do an inventory of our city-owned property, which we started in 2015. It took a while.
Yeah.
You know, and so at this point, what we have, and y'all can find this on our website, I think it's a fantastic tool. We now have a live GIS tool that shows city-owned property. And in that review over the last few years, what we've done is categorize our properties, right? I mean, there's stewardship properties, which are largely our parks. Operational, City Hall, we're not going to repurpose City Hall for housing at the moment, right?
Creative.
Right. And then there's our strategic parcels, which are the ones that are currently either under development for affordable housing or which we're moving to. Then there's this other category that are review. That's a longer list of parcels that we're moving through, looking at, saying, and it's everything. We want to know if it's actually feasible, cost effective, as well as location. What are the restrictions on the property? Because both municipalities get property in a number of different ways, and so the complicated nature of undoing restrictions on property sometimes is not worth it. So we're reviewing that list, and as we move through that list, you will see more and more RFPs come out for public-private partnerships, so that we say, here's the parcel, here's what we know about it, here's what we know from the due diligence we've done on the site with geotech, environmental assessment, those kinds of things. Here's the number of units we think that can be produced here. It could be a parcel that's, I'm making this up at this point, the 4 single-family lots that would work really well for the community land trust, right? So could we potentially sell for $1 those lots to the community land trust, and there could be 4 affordable homes on those single-family lots that the city is not going to have another use for, because they've come generally decades ago through some kind of tax foreclosure. So we could use those as, because community land trust doesn't mean everybody can live in the same place on the same piece of property. That's not the model that we're looking at. We're looking at scattered site, parcels that we own in different neighborhoods, how we might be able to leverage those, how some of our bond funds as well could go into picking up parcels from private market. Maybe it can be assembled with city-owned property. And I think one of the ways that we could work with the county is to look at, are there contiguous city-county parcels? I think that could be a really interesting exercise that we certainly would be really happy to look at with county staff. Because we're working on those too. So if we have a piece of property that's half an acre, what's next to it? Is it marketable? And can we, do some parcel combinement that allows for a more developable piece of property?
Thank you.
So on that same thought, when you keep yours, I would encourage you to look at some of the things that San Diego, California is doing on some of their city infield. It'd be pretty amazing what they're doing for home ownership, for the opportunity for scattered sites, places where we can serve on property.
I've seen it. They're doing some really good work.
Mindy, can you update us about and I'm sorry, I don't know the answer, where the county's at sort of in inventory?
Well, planning did that a couple of years ago, was inventory the county-owned property, but Jim was just saying, we map that for you for the next work session on infrastructure. I mean, clearly, the properties we own, whether it came back to us related to tax foreclosure or otherwise, are spread out. They're not necessarily tied to ready infrastructure, but it's still worth, as Heather says, it is going through updating those maps. So Jim says they'll work on that for your next work session. And I will say, I saw Dr. and maybe if you have something to say, jump in. Dr. Baldwin walked in, and I think that housing is an example where we leverage property we own for the teacher housing. So I mean, we do have some successful models where we leverage property we own around the workforce housing or affordable housing project. I don't know, Dr. Bob.
I remember a few years ago,
Thank you.
John Creighton found some lots within the city of Asheville and tried to pursue building something there. But honestly, the city created so many roadblocks for him, I think it got stopped.
Well, and I think Heather's raising a good point, which is whether we've done it in the past or not, we should redo it and have the conversation.
Right.
Yeah.
One thing about that's happening, I've developed with the city for about the last 12 years, and to Kevin's point, we're all fighting for the same dirt.
Right.
So as it comes up, I could be going against him, I could be going against Scott, I could be going against whoever else is going after that property, and only one of us is going to get it. And we're going to pay more because we're all still going for it. I think, and then so there, we can only produce so many affordable units, because when we go to the bank says, where are you? We're not going to do it for this. There's people who turn down projects, who work with other companies, over $15,000 of first year income. So the only way to really make this thing work is to try to, the land cost is the key to the affordable housing. That is the key. If we can't put one thing in one box, but the key thing is we can only pay so much for the dirt, because that is the one thing we have to have. It's got to be in the right spot. We get the incentives on Metro Corridor, all these things, the bus lines and different things, and you run out pretty quick. So the only other way to really make bang for your buck is to do something where either y'all offer it, the city offers it, or both of you do it, or some kind of process. You probably would get a longer affordability out of the whole project if you get that.
The other piece I would say that we're, and Kirk is certainly one of the beneficiaries of this, and Lee Walker Heights project will be too, with some of the funds going in there, is one of the things we've learned is we can make a piece of property as developable as possible before the developer gets to it, right? If it's an infrastructure question, those kinds of things, if we can use them, some of our CIP funds or some bond funds to do some of the infrastructure work ahead of time, then that's an upfront construction cost already off, right? So trying to look at those different ways that we can, because, we're limited in the way that our funds work, just like the county would be. And bond funds are capital funds, but they can only be capitalized. Well, infrastructure is capital expense. So what if, on this piece of city-owned property that doesn't have infrastructure, but it is in a good location and all those things, what if we made it more developable by putting it, these are the things that we're looking at, with each piece of property we do, weighing pros and cons, but those are the pieces that make those properties successful and then allows the units to be affordable because the construction costs up front are already lower. So, combining those different assets that the municipalities have is what we're trying to do to reach these various levels of affordability.
Some of the other areas that we can work in now, the other counties and stuff, we're still able to go in and buy and put 2 or 3 houses in a cluster. If a farmer has 500 acres and wants to sell a couple of lots here and there, if his acreage goes over 1 acre, that farmer, he's thrown into a stormwater system. He's considered a subdivider. So if there was some way of taking small tracts of land in the rural parts of the county where we can still use septics, you can utilize wells, but you don't have to go in and put in a major subdivision. Your costs are so enormous with a major subdivision in a rural part of the county that you can't continue doing that. But there's other counties and other areas that we can go where we're able to buy 3 acres. And in 15 minutes, we're given the go-ahead to put 3 houses on that.
That's right.
3 acres, and you're moving on. And it doesn't happen here anymore.
You go to his point, and I think, we have to, as Buncombe County officials and Plains, we have to listen very carefully to what he's saying, because it's driving the cost up, which is not allowing us to be able to go and get this smaller piece of property and develop that path to home ownership. And it's the cost of the permitting, it's the rules associated with that is driving, a lot of folks in South Carolina, or other counties where they're able to get that done very quickly. And we just have to look at that, whether it's in the city, if we're in the county, the city can get blamed for, it being complicated. Well, if you're in another county, Buncombe County gets blamed for being complicated. But we've got to simplify it to allow you know, again, with passion is little, and others that want to be able to own a home in Buncombe County, might have to move out. We gotta listen to Mr. King here, and some of everybody's comments, we gotta listen to that also. You know, I keep thinking of, I mean, if you've got a piece of property that's, you know, we need to get way outside on some of this thinking. I mean, Commissioner Farrar and I went to look at a co-op in Emma, where people went and got together and bought this old, you know, manufactured home park. And quite frankly, there's very few people in this room that would live there, because they would look at it in a certain way and think, well, I don't know that I would want to live in that home. But it took me back. It was very cool the way that, I mean, these are old manufactured homes, so they had figured out a way to come together and save that area and make it kind of cool for them. But you can do that in a new way. I mean, you can take property that we own and invest in the right type of housing, and then give someone the education, have the education programs, and show, you know, Ms. Little and her community or people in Emma how to be able to own that home. And if you supply the land, you can do it for $60,000 each. $60,000 for a home that'll outlast you about 10 years. So I think it can be done. So if you get way outside the box and listen to all these comments, that's pretty cool.
You know, I think what it's time for us to start doing is to be serious about affordable housing and stop talking about it. You know, when I listen to the barriers here today, it's the same barriers that I heard in 1971 when I started working in banking in this community. We had race, we had poor people, and you can go on and on. But until the county, the city, planning departments from both, all of the organizations who are working along with private developers, because folks, we can't do this as taxpayers. It'll never get done. We can't afford it. But it's going to take all of us working together. And we kind of sit around the table like we are today, but not only talk about it, but we've got to start. We've got to look at the land. What can we do? That's why we're working on the land trust now. But that's just a part of it. But what I want to see is how can we sit down, and maybe it will take the commissioners and city council, along with the city and county, to come together. It's going to take us to kick this off. We're the ones who have the authority and ability to really get everybody around the table. And then when we get the people around the table, darling, we gotta listen. Because it's gonna take that, and all of us are gonna have to give and take something. But at the end of the day, we will have affordable housing if we do that. And I don't want to be, well, I won't be here 40 years from now, so that's not to hear the one somebody like, you know, talk about what we're going through. Well, all of us ask for housing. It's no different. You know, a lot that I hear today is what I heard when my mom was there. And she worked there for 30 years, you know, the same problems. But until we decide that we're going to do it, and folks, we've got to, because the longer we put it off, and now I'm speaking as a taxpayer, the longer we put it off, the more it's going to cost us. And other services that we're, you know, when you look at the jail population, you look at what it's doing to the school, it's hurting all of us in some way. Even in some cases, I'm not sure we all realize. But we've got to come up with a plan. The city, county, all of us to start this work. I mean, Heather can't, you can't do it. You can't. I mean, you've got good intentions and I enjoy working with you, but we've got to get help, all of us.
Well,
But when can we do this? I mean, we need to come up with a plan. Go.
well, everybody has to be real, it can't be lip service.
Right.
When I hear the Chamber of Commerce talking about, well, we need to develop a transport system bring people in to be our workforce. That's a wrong priority. We have to make it so the people that work here, can live here, and be happy here. And everybody has to be on board.
Before I was ever running for commissioner, I used to have to go to commission meetings. And what really burnt me up on that, and I was ended up in jail on this and so, there was a young couple came in. The daughter was, she was pregnant, and they wanted to move single wide on the grandpa's property next to mother next property. Guess what? She wasn't black. Guess what? They got turned down. That's the problem we've got in the county. Gentleman called me the other day. He's bought partial land. He's going to put a double wide on it. But now, this is this great county of Buncombe. He can't put one on it unless he goes to the legal department. He goes before the planning board, and then he comes back to us to decide and cost him $350 more. We have to do something ourselves to straighten this out as far as the commissioners. This young lady, she never got her trailer. I went out to the property before I was commissioner. I looked at the property. Grandpa had a house. Then there's a double wide. Then there's another double wide. And there's a double wide over here. But this one with this single wide right here close to mom and dad's, so that the baby could, take care of the baby. And when you're saying you're getting turned down in certain areas, I don't want you to get turned down. And I don't want a white person to make more than black or a brown person. It don't matter. If you get a job, you should be able to make the same wage. I would like to know who's doing that personally, because I wouldn't mind talking. That's just the way it needs to be. It's not, if a person can do the job, and they hire them for $1,000 less than money, that's wrong. I don't care what it costs. And I want you to be able to own your home, no different than anybody else does. But we've talked about this for years, and I talked to Nate about this guy's property. And basically, there's 2 mobile home parks coming into the property. Basically, the mobile home parks, from what I understand, are as R1s now, and forever moved off. Then they're going to have to build a house because they're going to throw it back. So we as a county got to figure out what we're doing and straighten it out. The city's got problems too. You got problems, and we do too. But the affordable housing, I've listened to it 5 years. I've been here. I watched it before I ever got here, and I'll do whatever I can to try to help it, but it's not working at the present time. And how it's going to work, I don't know.
That's a question. I was wondering if, this is the first meeting I've been to here, but I was wondering, are there any initiatives using small homes being built, tiny homes that people are reading about? I know that they're doing it in Detroit, where I used to live.
We have mobile homes on that time.
The Affordable Housing Committee, for the city of Asheville is actually researching it now. We just don't have enough information to be on the side of it. So we are doing some research when it comes to the Affordable Housing Committee.
Just building on that, I mean, an idea, or there's someone else in mind?
I didn't know a commissioner.
I can wait.
No, jump in, I
This
didn't
has
know.
been
Yeah.
real educational, and it seems like these workshops are working so great, but we sometimes put so much in and we don't get everything, we don't get to finish what we need to. And, I mean, I have many questions, and the first one is little, that is absolutely wrong. Race, just like what Mike said, male, female, black, white, whatever. They should never be no pay structure different in that. I think everyone here agrees with that. And it's something that's been overlooked, and we need answers for it. We don't need to come in here 6 months from today and talk, just like Mr. Whiteside said. We talk about this every time we come in about pay. What has been done? Nothing. Let's get some answers. And, Mr. King, I love building, and this is a question that I've wanted to ask affordable housing. I got 2 kids, 4 grandkids. They're not going to be able to afford to live here unless they inherit what I've got. And, everybody says Asheville, Buncombe County is where I live. Asheville is the name of the town. I love Asheville, I love Old County, and I want them to stay here.
But you're now gonna be restricted on giving your kids your land, because you can't give them so many lots over a certain period of time. You have to wait on a certain amount of time to lapse before you can even give a certain amount of lots to your children.
Right, I just built my son a house and had to go through a bunch of loopholes of how much gift tax I could give my daughter-in-law, and give my son, and my wife could get, there's loopholes there, but them are going away too. Hey, you can't sell them this for this price because it's valued more than that. And, I look at some of these pictures here, and I know everything's changed. As a kid, I was a country boy. I wanted to live in the country. I wanted to mow grass. I wanted to have a little farm. I wanted to have animals. Today's kids want to come home, get on the computer, and live in an apartment. I mean, I'm totally against being there. But exactly, and I mean, let's give Mike Fryer and give AD Tech Board some credit here. What you were saying to us today, and everyone, is get together like AD Tech with Greg Israel, what he has done in 4.5 to 6 months of getting a plan together. If we could get a committee together of the, housing deal, we can make it, but it's like I say, is everybody fighting after the same piece of real estate? Everybody's thinking about what they can make instead of how we can save it. I mean, we could go on till 9 o'clock tonight, but I just have never understood what affordable housing is when it costs what it does, the restrictions we've got.
Well, on that note, well, on that note, and kind of building on what you were saying, as another potentially actionable item, I think it would be exciting to convene some sort of either staff level, staffing commission, county, city, but some level, sort of an accelerated working group to say, let's look at all the different kinds of inventory and how those stack up with affordability and what would be required at the zoning level to open up some of those conversations so that we could look at smaller structures, we could look at manufactured housing, we could look at stick-built. I feel like all these sort of float around in the ether, we talk about them, and then in terms of actually figuring out what would be required to be actionable. I grew up, my mom she was a single mom, she rented apartments until I was 18. The first house she bought was 650 square feet. And that was a huge day for her. So I mean, I think people getting into home ownership might mean a 650 square foot house the first time through. And that can be a big victory in a family's life. So anyway, so concretely, I would love to see not just an inventory of sort of county-owned property, but sort of an assessment of what would be required to be able to do that kind of building in this county and have that process accelerated, what would be involved to do the ideas that Joe has around manufactured housing. So at least we could move, at the next conversation we have, we could be bouncing up against concrete possibilities.
I think it's a really good tie to your next work session, which is mapping just that.
Right.
I mean, that's the intent of it. So I hear you saying bring also some concrete kind of strategies, be they from a planning perspective or land use perspective, cost, and then where the infrastructure is. And I think it is if not, we will change that. I also hear Commissioner Presley's points, a lot of information to take in and making sure there's enough time to dig into this so what do we do about it at the next time.
And I think to the lady's point about the tiny homes. Tiny homes are, I'm going to give you my opinion. Tiny homes are very trendy. They're the BMWs of the housing market, if I can use that. They're very expensive. They're very small, but most are very expensive for the amount of square feet. And it's I've said this before, it's kind of to use Mike's terminology, I'm a manufactured housing guy, but most people would refer to it as a single wide. It's a super little single wide, which is not allowed in Buncombe County. So there you go. It's not allowed in the city of Asheville. It's zoned out, as long as I can remember, it's not allowed in You know, in a lot of places, it's not allowed in R1, R2 in Buncombe County. It is simply zoned out because of, you know, prejudice towards that product. What I've been doing for 30 years is try to understand is that there are people actually inside that home who are prejudiced towards that home. You're being prejudiced towards those people that can only afford that. So, actionable item. One, we'll talk about it for a long time. You allow multi-section manufactured homes in R1 and R2 in Buncombe County, unless it's deed restricted with certain exterior requirements. Is that
No different than what we're talking. They build a development, and they have to have, to get the credits, they have to have X amount of percentage. Like, they do 20 homes, you gotta have affordable. Well, okay, well, we got affordable, and mobile home, you know, but it can still work. I think some of them are actually using pods from different things to get the stuff. That's done, you know, in mobile home factories, and it's working. So, you know, if we stay with the rules that we have, it's not going to happen. We've done this almost 5 years.
Well, I'll tell you, I was with Mr. King. I built many affordable house on one lot in this city. Until everybody started buying lots, and you couldn't buy lots for $25,000, $20,000, $14,000. So what we started doing, we built this new thing called an ADU in the back, which gave me one more person, which I did at 80% AM on the house and 60% on the garage. So we got everybody kind of in there, but then we're still getting people buying up these little lots to build a house and sell it for $350,000. So now I have to learn from Scott and his model and say, okay, let me buy a big piece of land and build 70 units on it. The only way I can do that is do it through Clayton Homes, where I'm buying every one of my apartments is a modular house that they'll crane in all day long in the building and be done. It's already done. The mirrors on the walls, everything's in there ready to go. And it's going to be a great thing. 70 units at 60% AMI. Nobody's doing that. I'm crazy for doing it wrong. But the fact is, that is the only way right now that you can get in on the dirt. I was with the counties to help me with that, the city helped me with that, so we can get in there and produce this. But unless you but it takes these big projects, a team of people with Mountain Housing. It takes me a long time, because I have a small team, to actually produce the 70 units. Whereas if Mr. King went out here and bought his land at 2 acres apiece, he could have probably built 20 units before I even started mine. So the problem is the delay in getting the product. It's just like coming down the line here. It's the money. We've got Section 8 vouchers. We've got everybody's doing it, but we can't do it fast enough because we're getting beat out on the land, or there's restrictions, or there's whatever there is. If we could do it another way and produce something, it would help. And I've heard Mountain Housing say a lot as well, hey, we need a bigger living wage. We need more money. We need to pay people more. I don't know how you make the market pay people more. So maybe the only way you can control it is saying, we'll allow this different type of housing to be produced or placed here to where you can go on your farm or wherever and put in less. I just bought a lot from a couple who are wanting to be more energy efficient. They're going out to Wellington Park. They bought a unit because that's the only place that you can go and buy a house, have it in there, brand new. They're leaving an old house that was moved from another location to where I bought. I'm going to tear it down. But that's reality.
I'll just say a couple things real quick. Planning's always the department where we get to be the seesaw, and we're the seesaw with the development community and citizenry. And I'm hearing a couple things here. I will say tiny homes, a whole different ball of wax. Sometimes those can be, I know it's the newest, coolest thing. You see them on Home and Garden television, and every time I see one, I want to cringe, kind of, because they can be so many different things. They can literally be a shed on wheels. They can be an RV. We've got direction from the Office of the State Fire Marshal. We have to be really careful of how we permit them, because a lot of them really can't be set up permanently. However, We don't keep anyone from building, say, a small house on permanent foundation. Totally fine. You can do that. We can look at a text amendment. We can add manufacturing homes to R1 and R2. And that's something that I'm hearing a clear theme here. And we can look at that, getting that to the planning board and bringing that. We'll say, we are going to hear from some folks about it.
Oh, I've already heard from
I know. And also, Mr. King is correct. He's, when he talks about the special subdivision requirements. Now, there's a reason we have to be careful that planning is utilitarian in nature. It's the greatest good for the greatest number. What we try to do is balance. Remember, Buncombe County, Asheville, we're an NPDES Phase 2. What that means is National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System. Because Asheville is a large urban area in Buncombe County, we do have extra stormwater regulations. We have erosion control. We also have the fire marshal we have to satisfy. So with the up to 3 lots, you don't have to do any standards, but access beyond that, you can look at sometimes minor subdivisions with some lesser standards. We can certainly revisit subdivisions and look at Asheville has something called cottage development. That's worked, I think. Kirk, have you done one?
Sure.
And you've done 2 in Asheville. So we can certainly look at a It's basically it's a larger lot that includes numerous smaller homes, and they have like a shared common courtyard and parking. It kind of builds a mini pocket neighborhood.
Right.
And it's good for, say, a little bit larger infill lots, but you really need the water and sewer there to support it. But we can, the zoning ordinance, what is it? It's a living document, and we can certainly look at changes.
Well, you were saying about shared housing and that model, I'd be interested in exploring that more, for, expanding to firefighters, some of our really relevant things, if you're looking at firefighters, think about county, like living and,
To other sectors, including,
I think a firefighter would be,
in the next meeting, of course, we are doing infrastructure. We plan on bringing you a whole arsenal of maps, where we see growth potential in the county. We also plan on bringing you a panel of experts from across the spectrum, MSD, water, even broadband. Let's talk about everything. Let's talk about what we got and go from there.
I'd also like for us to look at, the city and the county, if we have, we're very good at, because of density requirements or because, whatever, you want to put a bunch of people in one spot. That's not always right. We have a piece of property that we can develop for the opportunity for, as Ms. Little said, an opportunity for someone to make that step out of affordable housing into affordable home ownership. It can be done for less money, I believe, than we're paying for these affordable rental. So, if we got 15, 20, 30, 40, units where folks can actually own their homes. It can be done.
I agree, I think that Greg is saying, some people say, transportation, when you start building big infrastructure in rural areas, how do you feel?
But you could very easily do this in Swarmore or other places that have an opportunity for like us to, there's places this can be done, but, again, you have one person come here and say this, and there's thousands of people that say exactly what she's saying. They just want to know how to take the next step into home ownership. And I want to own something that I can hand down to my kids, or have an opportunity at a later date for me to even possibly take the next step, then I become a landlord. And what I was in before, and then I moved to the next step. A lot of people it's done.
I hear what you're saying, Greg, how long does it take for somebody to think about responsibility?
a change of bus that's gonna really kick it into that, just getting into town.
I agree with everything you're saying, but the mechanics of it, I want to know if that's a lot of money.
They are coming in as a massive boat.
Can I make one more pitch? Well, we have this moment with you, although I'm sure we'll have other moments. I think all of this is part of the solution, and I think it's, and I commend Mr. Booth and Ms. Little for both being two of the most creative people in this room in terms of the different things that they do. I know that Dewana is going to be a homeowner in not the distant future because she's after it, but she's going to be there. Kurt is coming up with increasingly creative ways and collaborations with others in the room to make that work. And everybody else at the table is doing their part to make that happen. Let's don't leave money on the table though. We have a lot of people in these new hotels who are going to be working as housekeepers and valets and other things, and they need a place to live. And they may not be interested in home ownership. So home ownership is obviously a part of it, but they may not be. We need to also have, not completely lose focus on expanding our rental housing, permanently affordable rental housing for a vast group of people that are an important part of this community, unless we're just going to start busing labor in from rural counties around Buncombe County. The 4% tax credit has virtually unlimited capacity in North Carolina. It only allows so much per unit, so it has to be matched by a local match. But the model that we put together for you and that we very much appreciate your support for and we've offered is the model that will work with the 4% tax credit. So we have a lot of challenges in this community, but let's face it, compared to a lot of North Carolina, Buncombe County, it's a pretty wealthy. There are a lot of us who have resources, a lot of us who own high dollar land and have built wealth in that way. We can afford to do a little bit more in terms of actual dollars into projects, particularly if those dollars will leverage federally subsidized resources. So I really encourage you all to consider that. It doesn't require a tax increase, but it requires prioritization of funds that are available to I think there's enough concern and enough understanding around affordable housing in this community that people would understand that it's not just a priority that we talk about, it's a priority that we put on our agenda. So I encourage you all to consider that.
All right, so then one small thing is I'm a part of the conversation outside of my community yet, with my profession at, is really looking at the time limits in which we give developers that we just fix it if it's just a one-day fix. Oh, it's 5 years of affordability. Then it's not really impacting the numbers. And I like that you use the term permanent affordability, both for y'all, both, you know what I mean? So, because that is the reality. Like if it's 5 years and they got land to develop 5 years of affordable housing, after that 5 years, what does that really look like? As the cost of living here rises, what does that really go look like? And is it really a benefit to invest in that versus some longer terms of affordability? And I just want you to consider that, because so often it's like, well, we're gonna get 20 units, and we're gonna get 20 units, but if it's 5 years of affordability, is it really having the impact that we need to have? And so I just caution you. Community land trust.
I just want to make one follow-up comment to the transit question. I just want to make sure that, transit we do feel is a connected strategy for affordable housing. That's an important thing to have on the radar. And while bus times may be long now, that doesn't have to be our future.
Right.
So I think just a reminder that the cities undergoing the transit master planning process, and I think that there's a real affiliated with housing and transit in this community, both in the city and county. You know, a few years from now, we're talking about just how quick you can get from Swannanoa to Asheville on the bus, and it's not a set, it's not set in stone. So we can all get that meeting.
And is, forgive me for not knowing, is that an area that's kind of under active consideration in the master transit plan in terms of those corridor pieces?
I think too, a reality is, if you look at the housing market, just a little national, most houses are on the market for $100,000 for someone buys a flipper. And that's what you all see.
So I just want to clarify one point, and I think Lana did a great job of raising it. But when you look at equity and pay, it's the very thing you all have focused resources on, which is there has to be equitable access to education, quality pre-K, and job training and work. It's not that people are paid differently in the same job, it's that they don't have the same opportunities to develop the skills and move into higher paying jobs. There's not equal opportunity. Lisa texted me and said, that data is being interpreted as though it's side-by-side jobs. The reality is, if I'm washing dishes in a restaurant and Jim is out serving as a hostess and getting tips, we're not earning equitable in the same industry. I just don't want to lose that. Your investments in quality pre-K, quality education, and things like Isaac Coleman and tipping grants are intended to change that trajectory. So I don't want to leave here believing we're doing nothing to change those things. That is what the data says. Lisa left and said, let's be clear about what State of Black Asheville said. It said they're working that people don't come with equitable opportunity for trajectory to increase their job skills, and that's what y'all are trying to build. And I just wouldn't want to leave here and anybody say we don't want to invest in the things we're currently investing in, intending to change that either. And you're welcome to weigh in.
Go ahead.
What I'm interested in, I understand, that's where Lisa's going in, but I am trustee of David Tech, and Andy was trustee of David Tech. And Dr. Watt, about a month before he died, I sat down with him and we talked about diversity a lot. And I told him, I said, Don, and I've even talked about, let's just go get a bunch of kids in the bus. Let's take them to David Tech. Let's get 35 kids. Let's take them over there. And let's take them through the mechanic shop. See what they think of that. Then we'll go down into the truck shop and see what they think of that. Then we'll go down to the welding shop and see what they think of that. Now, this is good paying stuff, okay? But then we'll go up to the machine shop and see what they think of that. And as a trustee and Harris and being part of the county and stuff, I would be happy to be able to put people in these classes so that they could come out and you wouldn't see this, what you call $1,000 a month difference in pay. They would be working their way into it, no different than what you have. And that's what I'm looking at. Let's, it goes back to the same thing. You can give a person a fish and they can eat for a day, but you can teach them to fish and they can eat the rest of their life. I would love to be able to put some kids in there and just see how many of them will go through these classes, graduate, and go out here to Scotland, make $40 an hour and work on Mercedes or whatever. I would love that. That's what technical schools need to be doing, because we all can't be educated to be able to get the best jobs. I can do that. I'm lucky to be where I'm at. But when we get to that, I'll be more than happy to help anyone.
Well, I want to be clear, I'm not exactly saying that, because from everything from preconception to access to quality childcare, to experiences in school, to work, they don't have equal opportunity to learn to fish. And that's what I'm trying to say we're investing in as a county, and I don't want to lose that.
Well, I think
So,
we're good.
We're all good.
Well, I think you got I don't know if what I said was misinterpreted. or-
No, you didn't.
What I'm saying is.
You said it
and
right.
what you just said, because it kind of, like, what you just said is kind of conflicted with the intent of my words. And I was intentional with my words to say it exactly the way I said it, with the full meaning of what I said, given who I'm talking to and what we're talking about today. So I don't want it to be diluted, but with the, let's stay focusing in these areas. And since we brought it up, I am going to touch on it. But if you're focused in these areas, as we watch the educational deficit increase year after year while we still fund these same areas, pre-K, I'm intentional with my words. And I push back on and it's not to say that the county and the city is not doing great things. I wholeheartedly believe in what y'all doing, and I just offer my insight as a way to look at it different, period. But I don't want you to feel like, yeah, we can fund the same things over and over and over again and hope for the best. You know what I mean? But what I'm trying to say is, let's really look at the things that we are funding, because some of them you might need to look at. Are they really having the impacts that we're trying to have? And we have these goals and we have these things that we're trying to achieve at the end of this time. I'm just appealing to look at it from a different perspective. Evaluate the things that you are funding. Evaluate the things that you're not funding. Isaac Coleman is not, like, I'm proud that the county did that, but it is not a say-all. Oh, we did this, they gonna be on their feet, take off running, that's enough. That's enough, we did enough. That's not the reality, because we do way more for other organizations, and that is a initiative that is supporting minority youth minority organizations, grassroots organizations. So that's like comparing apples to oranges. I just don't want us to get in that mindset of, oh, well, it's not this. Yes, the reality is, I know people who are in positions who are overqualified, had access to the tools, and still getting paid less than their counterpart. That is white, that is, I just don't want my words diluted, because I'm intentional with what I say, and I felt like that was kind of diluting the impact of my words. What I'm saying is, we have people in our community that's not getting access to the same tools as everybody else, who is not getting paid at the same level. The data, the statistics, you cannot argue with the facts of that. You can't argue research. It's the reality. And that's fine, that's where we at, but how do we move forward? So I just want to give ideas on how we can move the conversation forward.
I have been proud to convene these sessions on these really complicated, intractable, tangled up issues. And I think it's important that we can talk about affordable housing and spend time talking about race and equity. We explore race and equity, and we find ourselves talking about health outcomes and health disparities. I know that we will have time to organize conversations in different settings on a lot of these topics, including one of the priority areas that we've worked before that we haven't had a work session on yet, which is the workforce side. And so that is one of the things that we want to queue up and look forward to. There was one hand in the back, and I keep looking kind of to the empty seat of the chair, so I'm looking now over to the vice chair. I want to take direction from you about how you want to create the closure for this conversation so that we can respect everyone's schedules, but there was one hand up.
Honestly,
I had to
to
ask
me,
you guys.
this conversation has been great. We'll go all the way down, because I think we've all learned in the process. You know, maybe I'm wrong, but I do think we've learned. Ms. Little, Ms. Wood, Ms. King, all of y'all give us an idea of which way to go. At least we have an idea. 5 years here, and we haven't figured it out in 5 years, but we may not figure it out in another 5 or 4 or a couple months ago. And we're here to listen, and we're here to try to do it. But we, as commissioners, if we don't figure out how to fix the problem, affordable housing has to go down. When I was a very young man, I had a single wide go mobile home. That's what we're making. But that's where a lot of people have to start, and see it every day. And, we're neglecting the poor people. We neglected the girl in the meeting tonight that I was down in the commission meeting. We would like to heard in our phone, because we wouldn't let them put a house up that they want, that they could afford next to their family. That's neglect. So as county commissioner, we need to figure out how to quit neglect the people and fix our, you know, change some of our rules that we've overdone. And that's what I'm doing. But, you know, that's a little thank you for bringing a lot. And, you know, what I say is probably not a lot, but I think what we've come through for affordable housing, it has mostly been affordable housing, whether it's health or whatever. If you don't have a affordable place to live, the health's not gonna be good.